Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Pamela Vitale. Pamela Vitale was born on January 11, 1953, at Shepherd Field Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas, to U.S. Air Force Sergeant Vern B. Ludke, an accomplished pianist, and Carol J. Crowley Ludke, a vocalist and artist. Pamela spent most of her life in Minneapolis, Minnesota, with her family, including her sister Tamara. In her later years, Pamela worked as a flight attendant and visited various countries around the world. She met her first husband, Mario Vitale, in London, and then moved in with him. They had two children, Mario A. Vitale and Marissa A. Vitale. Despite appearances, their relationship was not the best from the very beginning. When it began to collapse, Pamela decided to return to the United States, taking her two children with her. In 1978, she moved to California in search of a better life. As a single mother, she could no longer work as a flight attendant for obvious reasons, so she tried her hand in various fields of activity. She worked as an accountant, a salesperson in a fashion boutique, and a manager in a computer company, but felt that none of these jobs were right for her. Nevertheless, Pamela continued to work to provide for herself and her children while also attending film school at the University of California. This path became more successful. Pamela enjoyed realizing herself in cinema, and eventually, she became a producer. Pamela's career took off during her third year of film school when she met her future second husband, Daniel Horowitz, who was a lawyer. He was a professional in his field, combining private practice with creative writing. Daniel wrote a script and saw great potential in it. He began looking for a producer who might be interested in his vision. His friend Tamara found out about the script and introduced them. Pamela became interested in the script, and thus a romance blossomed. A month later, she moved closer to him, and they began working together. Daniel and Pamela prospered financially. Thanks to Daniel's advocacy work, he gained popularity, which brought him many famous and wealthy clients. He frequently commented on high-profile criminal cases on television, even weighing in on the Michael Jackson case. Their inner circle knew Daniel and Pamela as happy people who sincerely loved each other, got along well. They seemed not just like spouses but also like best friends who understood each other perfectly. They had a bright future ahead of them. The next step they decided to take was to buy a big house together, unaware of how tragically their happiness could end. Around 6 p.m. on October 15, 2005, Daniel returned home after work. At that time, they lived in a prestigious area of a small town located approximately 30 kilometers from the city. Daniel had recently acquired a plot of land and moved in with his wife, while her children had already grown up and were living separately. Though they were a wealthy couple, they were living in a trailer because their dream home was still under construction. They were so close to realizing this dream that they were willing to endure any inconvenience. When Daniel returned home, he immediately noticed something odd. Pamela's car was near the trailer, although she should still have been at dance class. He initially brushed it off, thinking she had simply returned home early. Daniel took 2 bags of groceries and approached the trailer door, but froze in place as he saw a large stain of blood on the ground. His heart raced, but he tried to shake the thought away. However, when he opened the door and went inside, he found his wife on the floor in a fetal position, covered in blood. Daniel knew how to provide first aid, so he leaned over her body to turn her over. In that moment, he realized she was dead. She was cold to the touch and clearly had died several hours prior. Rigor mortis had already set in. He called emergency services and reported the incident. After hanging up, he leaned over his wife's body again and screamed so loudly that neighbors all over the area heard his heartbreaking cries. On the morning of the tragedy, apparently, someone had come in early that morning. Pamela opened the door, which led to an altercation. She managed to push a large TV toward her attacker, probably trying to defend herself, leaving traces of her bloody hands on it. Pamela desperately fought for her life. A mix of her blood and the attacker's was found on the floor. Particles of skin from the murderer were found under her fingernails. Despite her desperate resistance, Pamela was brutally beaten to death. The forensic examination revealed that Pamela had a broken nose and several knocked out teeth. She was killed by blunt force trauma to the head, which caused massive hemorrhaging in her brain. The attack was so brutal that portions of her scalp were torn off, and there were fractures on her skull. The attackers even inflicted wounds on her stomach and left a symbol on her back that looked like the letter H. It appeared that the attacker had spent considerable time in the trailer with Pamela. The detectives discovered that someone had taken the water and bathed, leaving behind smeared blood. It was possible that some of the cuts on Pamela were inflicted after her death. Naturally, detectives first suspected Daniel himself, as this crime was committed with extreme cruelty. In such cases, it is often found that the guilty party is a close person with a motive. In any case, Daniel had a reliable alibi. Several people could vouch for him that day. It was a usual day for a lawyer. He left the house around 8 a.m. and did not return until 6 p.m. The high-profile murder of a famous female producer attracted wide media attention, and this case was actively covered on television. Numerous rumors immediately began to circulate. It was about a prosperous, developing area with wealthy residents, where such a massacre of an innocent person was least expected. The local community wanted to know the truth before the next attack happened. It was necessary to stop the bloodthirsty criminal. Pamela was found in her underwear. Here were no traces of a break-in, which confirmed their suspicions. Only a husband or lover came to mind. There was no evidence of abuse, and nothing was missing from the trailer, despite the fact that the wealthy couple had a lot of valuables inside. This meant that theories involving abuse or robbery were unlikely. Nevertheless, even after the alibi was confirmed, the rumors did not stop. Some speculated that Daniel could not have committed the crime himself. As a lawyer, he constantly communicated with potentially dangerous people who could easily have carried out something similar at his behest. Detectives carefully checked this theory, analyzing the data on his computer and phone. However, they found no grounds for suspicion against Daniel and could not confirm that Pamela had a lover. Nevertheless, law enforcement officials did not abandon the idea that the criminal must have been well acquainted with Pamela. He was probably a resident of the area. This theory was not without foundation, as a statement was found in a trailer indicating harassment. According to Daniel, they had been persecuted for quite some time. As a result, he even left a restraining order against one of their neighbors to Pamela, but he never filed the documents with the court. Daniel admitted that there had been difficulties with one local resident who did not like them. However, he managed to reach an agreement with this person after weeks of bickering, and the problems ended without filing a complaint. He kept the restraining order just in case something happened again. The check on this neighbor yielded no results, as he was away at the time of the attack and had a reliable alibi. He was subsequently excluded from the list of suspects. On the day Pamela was buried, a press conference was held, during which the police announced the arrest of the probable killer. It turned out to be a 16-year-old teenager named Scott Dileski, who was just 2 weeks away from his 17th birthday. He did not personally know Pamela's family, but the victim's husband, Daniel, had helped his mother, Esther Fielding, with paperwork. Scott's family was experiencing financial difficulties, so Daniel did not even take money for his assistance. This was the unexpected price for his kindness. Scott Dileski was born in San Francisco. Soon after his birth, his parents divorced, and Esther raised the boy. Quite quickly, she found a new partner and remarried. Scott claimed that his stepfather could be cruel, but his mother had never witnessed any such incidents. Information about the early years of his life is contradictory. Some claim his stepfather could indeed be cruel, while others deny it. There is also conflicting information about the mother's attitude towards her son. Despite the difficulties with the family, when his father offered for him to move in, Scott refused. Shortly before Pamela's murder, Esther got divorced again, leading to financial problems and an acute housing crisis. She and her son were left without a place to stay, and Esther desperately sought employment. But finding a job while dealing with housing issues proved difficult. Fortunately, friends extended a helping hand, offering to temporarily move in with them. Esther and Scott were offered to settle on a property in a trailer. In fact, the living conditions were modest, but they had no choice. During this period, Scott was going through a transitional phase, showing signs of rebelliousness. As a pleasant but peculiar young man, he had previously been a Boy Scout and a baseball player. Before moving, he had studied quite well. Coincidentally, a chain of tragic events had been triggered by the loss of a loved one. Shortly before the move, Scott's half-sister died in a car accident. This serious incident caused significant psychological distress for him. Many believe that his mother's indifference led to negative changes in his behavior, but she did not remain idle. She tried to support her family during that time. Scott became increasingly detached from society and closed off, exhibiting low energy. His behavior also took on some strange characteristics. For instance, he once drew a pentagram and danced around it. This was only an external manifestation of his problems, while those who constantly interacted with Scott did not notice any significant alarming changes in his behavior. He became increasingly immersed in dark thoughts and began to write disturbing poems, probably to attract his mother's attention. Esther was sure that her son simply exhibited quirks. She did not speak of him as a difficult child. She believed that Scott was going through a challenging period in his own way due to the death of his sister and the financial difficulties their family faced. Esther remembered how he previously could not even stand the sight of blood, but when the police first spoke to him, he claimed that at the age of 12, he had tried various illegal substances. Gradually, Scott showed an increasing interest in crime. He read a lot about serial killers and school shootings, spoke more often about these topics, showing an unhealthy fascination. Friends noticed that he was becoming increasingly distant. When detectives looked at Scott's computer, even more questions arose. They found very disturbing content, particularly concerning the practice of cutting up animals. One of Scott's friends, whom he met after the move, said that not long before Pamela's murder, they had decided to sell a truck, viewing it as the only way to improve their lives financially. The teenagers needed money. A solution was found quickly. They lived in a wealthy area, so they decided to put in some effort to earn the necessary amount. Scott, whose demeanor was becoming increasingly gloomy, decided to take the path of crime and rob a house, launching another chain of alarming events. Shortly before Pamela's death, a woman named Karen contacted the police, noting that a purchase she did not make had been charged to her credit card. An order from an online store was delivered to a nearby house where Esther and Scott lived. Someone from this household had purchased special lighting equipment for growing illegal plants. All of this led to Esther, as it was under her name that the suspicious order was made. However, Karen did not want to contact the police immediately. Esther was outraged by what she perceived as slander and believed that they were trying to put her in a bad light. Esther denied that she had ordered anything similar on the internet. However, the property owner suspected something was wrong and checked Scott's computer. Under pressure, Scott quickly confessed that he had come up with a fraudulent plan involving credit cards and that he had ordered the lighting fixtures. Soon after, Pamela died. In response to this incident, the parents of Scott's accomplice pressured him to confess to the scam, fearing that the young people could be involved in much more serious offenses. Maybe, the fraud involving the credit cards led to a robbery that ended in murder. His parents insisted that the accomplice go to the police station and confess everything. Interestingly, when he left the interrogation room, the detectives had in their hands a story that Scott had killed his neighbor. The young man who testified about all of this received immunity from prosecution for providing testimony. It was he who had pushed Scott into fraud and suggested that he engage in illegal activities. When the police came to arrest Scott, he was not at home. Esther was detained and admitted that her son was at a nearby location with his girlfriend. Less than an hour later, he was arrested along with Esther, who was also considered a participant. Esther and her son were held in custody for destruction of evidence and possibly for murder. Bail for Esther was set at $500. The suspicion against her arose from the story about a backpack that contained details of accounts and numbers of people from whom Scott had stolen money or planned to steal. Several people had already suffered due to the swindler. Esther's actions were viewed as criminal. The night after Pamela's murder, she contacted Scott to inform him of police activity in their area and asked him not to come home. Scott told her about the records and the backpack containing the data, asking her to throw it away, which she did. Esther insisted she was simply afraid for her son's safety. Scott was with his girlfriend, named Jenna Reddy. She later also ended up at the station, even testified against her boyfriend at the trial. She stated that he often talked about different ways of killing, for example, that shooting a person is less painful than beating them to death with a bat or stabbing them with a knife. According to Jenna, Scott often wondered how long it takes to beat someone to death and was obsessed with this topic. After the crime against Pamela, when they pressured Esther, she quickly agreed to cooperate with the authorities, receiving guarantees for protection from criminal prosecution. She denied any connection to her neighbor's murder. However, opinions about Esther were very conflicting. Some believed that she lived for her son, while her ex-husband did not share this belief. In any case, Esther changed her testimony, clearly trying to justify herself. Mainly, Esther talked about the backpack that she had thrown away. She did not know all the contents but believed they were unrelated to the murder. There was data on all the people who had become victims of Scott's fraudulent scheme. Esther helped find some items they had tried to destroy, including shoes and gloves that had blood stains on them. An examination showed that the items contained the blood of Pamela. Scott also left a shoe imprint at the crime scene, and samples of his DNA were found on Pamela's foot. In Scott's room, handwritten notes were discovered, some of which contained information about accounts of people who were likely to have been deceived by the same fraudulent scheme. In addition, there were plans to kidnap people. Apparently, Scott was ready to make money by any means, regardless of the seriousness of the crimes. There were also descriptions of how to get rid of evidence. All this confirmed the guilt of him. There were many coincidences. Even the symbol carved on the back of Pamela resembled the signatures that Scott used. A public defender was appointed at the beginning of the trial. However, there was also strong evidence against Scott that came to court. He was the complete opposite of his Gothic image during the investigation. All this was part of the defense attorney's strategy to humanize a dangerous killer in front of the jury in order to acquit him. According to Scott's version of events told before the trial, on the day of the murder, he decided to take a walk towards a local waterfall. He returned from this walk with serious injuries. According to him, while he was walking, he accidentally met a strange woman who attacked him, resulting in his injuries. By an amazing coincidence, she was Pamela, so the blood stains on both her and his clothes matched the DNA of the victim. He claimed that she had clawed his face, cut his wrist, and injured his hand. When he was arrested, the injuries were still fresh. Naturally, his story sounded unrealistic. Why would Pamela attack Scott at the waterfall? What happened to her afterward? How she ended up in the house, and who attacked her were all major questions. The evidence against Scott included all his browser queries related to animal cruelty, his obsession with crimes, plans for murder, material evidence, blood on items, confessions from friends of his girlfriend and her mother. The lawyer tried to highlight his best qualities and described him as a decent guy, but against the overwhelming evidence presented by the prosecutor's office, it seemed futile. The only point that might have raised doubt, as stated by the lawyer, was the discovery of DNA samples. In addition to Scott's and Pamela's blood, traces of an unidentified person were found in the house. The defense attorney insisted that the detectives overlooked this evidence from the start and focused solely on proving Scott's guilt. The prosecution argued that the evidence against Scott was too substantial to be dismissed, while the evidence suggesting Scott's innocence was virtually insignificant. The jury went into deliberation to decide Scott's fate. It took them 18 hours to reach a decision, ultimately sparing him from the death penalty, as they chose to try him as a minor. It was assumed that he would serve the rest of his life in prison. Scott was found guilty of first-degree murder a month before the final round of hearings was held. Pamela's husband took the stand and stated that in his many years as a lawyer, he had represented at least 50 different murderers but had never seen a total lack of remorse like Scott's. Daniel believed that Scott had no redeeming qualities that would allow for parole eligibility. He deserved to be in prison for the rest of his life, and so it happened. Scott Dileski was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was to remain in a juvenile facility until he turned 18 and then be transferred to an adult prison. Immediately after Scott turned 18, he appealed to have his sentence reviewed, but his efforts were in vain. In 2009, Scott filed a claim that his rights had been violated. He wanted to change the venue of the hearing and claimed that some evidence which could refute the appeal was also rejected. The next attempt was made in 2011, where he pointed to evidence indicating the involvement of an unknown person in the murder, specifically claiming that the authorities did not even attempt to identify who owned all the DNA traces found in the trailer where Pamela died. He insisted that the nature of the crime indicated a personal motive. Scott himself allegedly did not know Pamela, and it made no sense for him to kill her, especially with such cruelty. Additionally, the detectives claimed that the criminal remained in the trailer for an extended period, consistent with the timeline, but Scott asserted that he had been at home during that time. Again, his arguments did not lead to any significant changes. Another appeal was filed in 2016, with Scott insisting that his life sentence was wrongful because he was a minor at the time of the crime. The appeal was accepted for consideration. During his imprisonment, state laws were revised to prohibit life sentences for minors without the possibility of parole, and he was automatically given the opportunity for early release after serving 25 years in prison. In 2030, Scott will have the chance to present his case for release. However, whether this release will be approved by the Commission remains uncertain. It is difficult to predict the outcome, but it is known that Scott became an exemplary prisoner. He did not drop out of school and continued to receive an education within the prison walls. Pamela's family stated that they would definitely be present at the parole board hearing to prevent him from being released, viewing him as an especially dangerous criminal. Daniel never finished building the house he dreamed of with his wife. He was forced to sell the land along with the partially built house because he simply wanted to forget everything that had happened and start life anew. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Angela Allen. In early 2012, Angela Allen was a 16-year-old high school student living in Van Buren, Arkansas. She was known for her positive and kind nature and was very religious, attending church regularly. Angela had a passion for children and dreamed of pursuing a nursing career in the future, with the goal of working in a hospital. She also loved animals and was always optimistic about life. Angela grew up in a dysfunctional family. Her father was abusive to her mother, but fortunately, he did not harm the children. However, he abandoned his family and had no contact with Cecilia or his children. After he left, Cecilia became involved with another man, who turned out to be cruel. She endured years of abuse from him. Later, Cecilia became addicted to illegal drugs and alcohol, which eventually resulted in her losing custody of her children. Cecilia did not want her children to be placed in foster homes or boarding schools. Cecilia eventually agreed to let her mother adopt Angela and her brother. Although Cecilia visited them frequently, they were unable to develop a close relationship. Cecilia's mother was determined to provide her grandchildren with everything they needed. Although she was retired, she took on a part-time job to earn extra money. She raised the children in a loving environment, hoping they would receive a good education and become independent. Despite their efforts, finances were tight, and they had to save a lot. The children understood their situation, did not ask for much, and appreciated their grandmother's care. During her school years, Angela dreamed of having a computer and a mobile phone. She wanted to connect with friends on social networks and play games like other children her age. Angela often felt jealous of her friends who had these devices. However, she understood that her grandmother could not afford them, so she never pressured her to buy expensive things. Angela was usually modest, influenced by her strong religious beliefs. Nevertheless, every time she went to church, she prayed for a smartphone. Finally, her prayers were answered. On her 16th birthday, her grandmother saved enough money to buy her a modern mobile phone. Angela was so excited that she quickly created an account on social networks. Almost every day, she made new friends. However, this naive girl did not realize the potential dangers of sharing her phone number with strangers. Angela often received calls from unknown numbers, even late at night. This situation worried her brother, who was more aware of the potential dangers. He realized that Angela's naivety could put her in danger. One time, her brother answered a call from a stranger. The caller turned out to be a 30-year-old man to whom Angela had given her cell phone number via social media. Angela's brother threatened to report the man to the police if he did not stop contacting Angela. He reminded the caller that Angela was only 16, prompting the man to hang up. A stranger wanted to meet Angela, but it was clear that he had bad intentions. The situation worsened when Angela misrepresented her age on social media. In the photos, she looked older, which meant that the men did not realize they were talking to a minor. This led to a serious argument between Angela and her brother. Her brother then told their grandmother about the situation, and she spoke to Angela, explaining the potential dangers and the intentions of these strange men online. Angela began to understand the risks involved in her behavior and realized that it was not safe. She promised her grandmother that she would avoid such situations in the future. On the evening of February 10, 2012, Angela told her grandmother that she was going for a walk, which was her normal routine, as she usually liked to walk before going to bed. While her grandmother did the housework, Angela went for a walk. After a while, her grandmother fell asleep. When she woke up, she was shocked to see that Angela had not returned from her walk. She began to panic and went to the police to report Angela missing. She explained to the police that Angela had left the night before and had not returned home all night. The grandmother sensed that something was wrong because Angela had never been out this late before, and it was unusual for her to run away. They had not argued, and all of Angela's belongings were still at home. The police quickly arrived at Angela's grandmother's house, where they found her distressed and pleading for help in finding her granddaughter. She provided a photo and description of Angela, as well as details of what she was wearing when she left. Several patrol cars searched the area but found no trace of her. By this time, many neighbors had learned of the situation and joined in the search. Some spoke to the police to offer their assistance. Unfortunately, no one had seen Angela that night, so they were unable to provide any information about the direction she had gone. Angela's grandmother described her usual walking route, and the police checked several times but found no signs of an attack or any clues as to Angela's whereabouts. Days passed without any progress on the case. During this time, everyone in the area knew that Angela was missing. The local community grew increasingly concerned because there had been no ransom demands. She had not contacted anyone, and her social media accounts showed no activity. As the crucial 48 hours passed without any updates, the hope of finding Angela alive diminished. However, her grandmother remained hopeful until the very end. The FBI was brought in to assist in the search for Angela. Agents first focused on her social media accounts. They checked her cell phone and, surprisingly, over the weekend after her disappearance, Angela sent several text messages to family members, including her mother, brother, grandmother, and a friend. In these messages, she claimed to have a new boyfriend and said that she had left with him in a black Chevrolet Camaro to a nearby town about 2 hours away. She asked them not to bother her. The messages sent from Angela's phone raised suspicions. Her grandmother believed that the messages were written in a way that did not match Angela's usual writing style. She suggested that the messages may have been sent by someone else who was trying to distract the search. After sending those messages, Angela, who was usually very communicative, stopped responding to friends and family, which was completely out of character for her. FBI agents discovered hundreds of contacts, including Angela's relatives and friends. After reviewing the information, they noticed a man who had recently contacted Angela, which led to suspicions of his involvement in her disappearance. Lloyd Jones was brought in for questioning and was found to have a history of violence against women. During the investigation, FBI agents discovered numerous communications between Lloyd and Angela, indicating that he had been trying to convince her to meet for some time. Lloyd was considered strange, especially in his interactions with girls. In 2001, he was convicted of abuse after breaking into the home of a woman he had been stalking. He attacked her, threatened her life, and abused her before leaving the scene. The victim reported the incident to the police, resulting in Lloyd being sentenced to 10 years in prison. He was paroled after serving 7 years for good behavior. In February 2012, Angela, who had been communicating online with Lloyd for a long time, suddenly disappeared. The police suspected Lloyd of being involved in her case. Lloyd claimed to live in the same city as Angela. He said he was only 1 year older than she was and was studying at a nearby school. Their online friendship developed into a romantic relationship. He tricked Angela, gaining her trust to obtain intimate photos of her, but he didn't stop there. The day before Angela went missing, she received an invitation from Lloyd to meet on the evening of February 9, 2012. When Angela left home for a walk, she was dressed up and had put on makeup. She didn't tell her grandmother that she was meeting someone, but when she returned, she acted strangely. She seemed worried and was crying, but she didn't explain why. The following evening, Angela went missing. During questioning, Lloyd confessed that he had met Angela online, where they developed a friendship and eventually agreed to meet in person. He stated that she had claimed to be 19, which made him feel comfortable meeting her. On the night they met, he picked her up in his car near her grandmother's house. However, he began to suspect that she might be younger than she had said. After a brief conversation, Angela revealed that she was actually 16. This worried Lloyd, who feared that he might get into trouble with the law, so he asked Angela to get out of the car. They only drove a short distance before he dropped her off, and he did not wait for her to return home. He claimed that he never saw her again and insisted that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. It was clear that Lloyd was not telling the truth. Analysis of the text messages exchanged between Angela and Lloyd showed that she quickly admitted her true age of 16, and he did not dispute this. This meant that he knew her real age. When confronted with this contradiction, Lloyd began to avoid the question, claiming that he could not remember that part of their conversation. He suggested that he might have missed the text message. During questioning, he continued to adjust his story and eventually recalled that Angela had called her friend before leaving the car. He claimed that a few minutes later, a black Chevrolet Camaro pulled up and she got into it. This was the car mentioned in the text messages from Angela's phone. FBI agents and police were skeptical of Lloyd's claim. To determine whether he had indeed sent the messages on Angela's behalf, they needed to analyze their communications in more detail. Some parts of the conversation were redacted, but an agent was able to reconstruct the conversations. Police discovered a history of Lloyd's online activity that began long before Angela went missing. He targeted young girls, trying to lure them into meetings. He had attracted several victims. Police interviewed some of these girls, and one confirmed that she had met Lloyd online. They had been communicating as friends for a while, and he seemed nice to her. In reality, he had taken advantage of her loneliness as she was going through a breakup at the time. Unfortunately, she agreed to meet him, which led her to a warehouse where she was attacked. After the attack, Lloyd threatened her for a long time, using photos to intimidate her into silence and prevent her from contacting the police. The police do not believe that Angela went to see Lloyd willingly. Lloyd tricked Angela using a method he had successfully employed before. Evidence also indicated that he used some photos and attempted to arrange a meeting with her. After the first meeting, Angela did not want to continue the relationship. It was unlikely that she would have willingly gotten into his car. He probably knew that she had a habit of going for walks before bed and waited for her near her house. Lloyd's story kept changing. He began to provide new details about Angela and her friend. He claimed to have heard that Angela and her friend were planning to go to the Arkansas River. This information was verified, and he was found to be lying. The police went to Lloyd's house and, with his permission, searched the premises. They discovered that he lived there with his girlfriend, who insisted that she did not believe he had kidnapped Angela. She claimed that on the day Angela went missing, Lloyd was busy working in a warehouse near their home and had no time to go out of town. The police were particularly interested in the warehouse because he had attacked another victim there. Lloyd was reportedly laying floors on the day Angela went missing, and his girlfriend was convinced of his innocence because he came home covered in dirt and construction materials. The police requested items for forensic analysis, and Lloyd's girlfriend provided what they needed. They found traces of dirt on his pants and jacket, but his shoes were suspiciously clean, leading the police to believe he had changed them. After mapping the location of the warehouse, the police noted that it was also where Angela's cell phone had last been active. The police decided to search the warehouse, hoping this would help them find Angela. When the police and Lloyd's girlfriend arrived at the shed, they immediately noticed a disturbed area of land behind the building. The land belonged to Lloyd, but they needed official permission to conduct a thorough search. Lloyd initially agreed, but he later prohibited digging in that particular location. The police brought specially trained dogs with them, and one dog signaled near the disturbed area next to the shed, which was unusual. However, the police could not take further action without a warrant. Several police officers interviewed neighbors who may have seen something on the day Angela went missing or afterward. However, no one reported anything unusual. Some neighbors said Lloyd had been on the land for a long time, which was not unusual since he usually worked in his shed. The police then had to leave. Given the situation, it was important to act quickly before Lloyd could destroy any evidence. The police managed to obtain a warrant in a very short time. The next morning, the officers quickly returned to the scene with the necessary documents and specially trained dogs. They suspected that the Angela was no longer alive. The police focused on a specific area that had interested them the day before and began digging through half a meter of loose soil. Forensic experts discovered a metal plate, and the search dogs became excited as they approached a steel plate. Underneath it, they found a blue plastic barrel that had been buried and sealed. It appeared that the barrel had been placed there recently, as the soil above it was still fresh and loose. The police then dug up the plastic bin. Inside, they found a body. The body was in poor condition and was immediately taken to the forensic lab, where the victim was identified as Angela Allen. The forensic expert concluded that she had been abused and that the cause of death was strangulation. Her grandmother needed psychological support to cope with the tragic news, even though the body did not require identification. On the day of Angela Allen's funeral, 16-year-old Angela was buried in the city center, attended by hundreds of people. There was now an urgent need to bring the killer to justice. The suspect, identified as Lloyd, had buried Angela on his property. DNA evidence linked Lloyd to the crime, confirming that he had strangled Angela, as indicated by marks on her neck. Although some time had passed since the murder, the cold February temperatures and the burial helped preserve much of the evidence, including the DNA. During a visit to his father in prison, Lloyd confessed to the crime. This confession was recorded and added to the case file. Lloyd's girlfriend later told the police that when he returned home that night, his clothes and shoes were covered in dirt and blood. She didn't think much of it at the time, but he must have discarded them afterward. With the overwhelming evidence against him, Lloyd's attorney didn't even attempt to argue for his innocence. Instead, the defense focused on the idea of an unintentional crime. During the trial, Lloyd changed his testimony. He admitted that he went with Angela because she wanted to watch the sunset. When Angela revealed that she was only 16 years old, he became upset. In a fit of rage, he pushed her into the river. After a while, he realized that she was not coming up for air. When he pulled her out, he discovered that she had drowned. However, this was all a lie. The medical examiner confirmed that Angela had not drowned. There were clear signs of strangulation on her body, and there was no water in her lungs. It is unclear why he chose to fabricate such a false story. Nevertheless, this obvious deception only strengthened the jury's belief in Lloyd's guilt. The prosecutor presented their version of events during the trial. Angela and Lloyd's first meeting took place on February 9. Angela, a teenage girl, had dressed up for a date with someone her own age, but became frightened when she encountered an adult man instead. She refused to get in his car and go home with him, which upset her. Lloyd was determined not to give up. He tried to convince her to meet again. When his attempts failed, he resorted to threatening her by saying that he would share her private photos with all the students at the school. Terrified, Angela agreed to meet him, but this time, she would not survive. He attacked and abused her, then strangled her. The jury quickly returned a verdict. Lloyd Jones was sentenced to 60 years in prison for Angela Allen's death, without the possibility of parole. He was also sentenced to an additional 30 years, which included 10 years for desecration of a corpse and 20 years in prison for using inappropriate photos of minors. However, things changed. After serving just 4 years of his sentence, Lloyd escaped. At the time, Lloyd was incarcerated at a correctional facility in Brick, Arkansas. He regularly worked at a construction site, where he gained the respect and trust of others. Eventually, Lloyd escaped. Angela's family was notified in time, as they were potential targets. Every available resource was mobilized to capture him. Residents were informed through the news on radio and television, and updates were spread via text messages and social media. Police searched the area for 3 days and eventually found Lloyd, who was hiding in a wooded area near the prison. He was arrested again and returned to prison. He is currently serving time in a maximum security prison in Arkansas. Angela's family was devastated by her loss, and the unexpected escape of the criminal caused widespread concern. The grandmother felt guilty for not paying enough attention to her granddaughter, not checking her social media messages, and trusting her own judgment. She realized that she had allowed this criminal into their lives. Driven by a desire for justice, Angela's grandmother led the effort to create a petition called Angela's Law. The law requires closer monitoring of abusers. It has successfully passed through all necessary channels and is now in effect. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Jamie Osuna. The police discovered the body of a woman in a hotel room. A few days before this, a man named Jamie Osuna had called his ex-girlfriend to confess to a crime, which helped the police capture a dangerous individual, later known as the Man with 1,000 Faces. Jamie Osuna was born on 1988 in Bakersfield, California, USA. His life was marked by violence and cruelty from the start. His mother became pregnant at 19 by her abusive boyfriend, who was 21. His father was physically violent towards his mother, causing hearing damage to him, the unborn child. When Jamie was born, his father abandoned him in the car seat because he wouldn't stop crying. Eventually, his mother left the abusive man and then met another man. They had another child, but both Jamie and his brother suffered abuse from this man, with Jamie enduring the worst of it. He was treated terribly. He was fed on the floor like a dog, tied to a tree, and physically punished. His grandfather wanted nothing to do with him, and his uncle often hit him with a brick, while his mother was consistently cruel. This led Jamie to harbor deep resentment towards her for not protecting him. He dropped out of school in the 9th grade and soon began displaying violent behavior. At 15, he attacked another boy, marking the first of several incidents that would land him in prison. When Jamie was 20, he attended a birthday party for a boy who was turning 16. At the party, he noticed his friend's mother, Joelele Castellano, who was a 37-year-old woman he found very attractive. During the celebration, Jamie got into an altercation with another boy and used a knife. Although the injury was minor, he was sent back to prison because he was on parole. In prison, Jamie started writing letters to Joelle. To his surprise, she responded, and they began corresponding. Despite having only met once at the party, Joelle fell in love with Jamie. Joelle was so devoted to him that she arranged for his release once he completed his sentence. She waited outside the prison for several hours, and when Jamie finally emerged, she was shocked to see that he had gotten tattoos on his face, including one that resembled the Joker's smile. Initially, this made her uncomfortable, but she soon accepted it. That night, they spent together in a hotel, and she became pregnant with Jamie's first child. Joelle felt very happy during her pregnancy and enjoyed being with the man she loved. However, after some time, Jamie began to reveal his true nature. Jamie had a keen interest in philosophy and psychology. Joelle encouraged him, suggesting that with study, he could have a bright future. However, things took a dark turn when Jamie began to show controlling and cruel behavior. He tried to dominate Joelle's every action, but she resisted. Their arguments escalated, eventually becoming violent. Despite Joelle being pregnant, Jamie showed no concern for her well-being. After their child was born, she reported his violent behavior to the police, which led to his imprisonment. Upon his release, Jamie pleaded with Joelle for another chance, and she reluctantly agreed. Unfortunately, he fell into banned substance use, and his violence worsened, culminating in threats against her. Once again, Joelle reported him, and he returned to prison. Jamie was released on Halloween night in 2011, but he had transformed. His face was covered in tattoos intended to frighten Joelle, who now wanted nothing to do with him. He began to harass her, making threats over the phone and stalking her from the shadows. This harassment continued for several days until Joelle contacted the police, prompting Jamie to go into hiding. One day, Joelle received a call from him. He confessed to attacking a girl in El Morocco motel. Her name was Yvette Pena. Yvette had her first child as a teenager. Compounding her difficulties, her partner began to show inappropriate interest in her. Over the years, she struggled with substance abuse and encountered legal problems, resulting in the loss of custody of all 6 of her children. Following this, she moved into a poorly regarded motel, the only affordable option as she tried to overcome her addiction and hoped to reunite with her children. However, Jamie's actions created barriers to this dream. After Jamie reported an incident at El Morocco motel to Joelle, she contacted the police to confirm if there was a report of an attack on a woman there. The police informed her that no such report existed, leaving Joelle feeling uneasy. She then called the motel to inquire about any similar incidents, but they declined to provide any information. A few days later, a staff member at the motel discovered a mutilated body in one of the rooms while cleaning. The scene was horrific, with bloodstains everywhere, indicating that the killer had been extremely brutal. The motel staff called the police, who remembered that Jamie had contacted Joelle. So they reached out to her for a statement and assistance in locating him. With her help, they found Jamie hiding at his grandparents' house, where he was arrested and taken for questioning. During questioning, Jamie denied any involvement, claiming that he had called Joelle just to scare her. He maintained that he had not killed anyone and only wanted to get his ex-girlfriend's attention to rekindle their relationship. The police found his story hard to believe, especially considering the timing while they awaited the coroner's report on the body. Jamie remained in custody. The woman's body was so badly mutilated that it took 8 months for investigators to receive the coroner's report. The examination revealed that she had been dead for 5 days before being found, which coincided with the day Jamie called Joelle. Due to decomposition, the coroner faced challenges in the examination, but they determined that the woman had been assaulted with multiple stab wounds and cuts inflicted by scissors. The cause of death was asphyxiation, suggesting she was alive and aware during the attack. Additionally, male fingerprints and DNA were found at the scene. When compared to Jamie's DNA, they matched. Jamie claimed he had consensual contact with her that night, explaining the presence of his DNA, but the police did not believe him. He was then sent to prison to await trial. Even while in prison, Jamie continued to harass Joelle. He sent her threatening letters written in blood and once mailed her a dead rat. He even discovered the address of the prosecutor handling his case and sent him several threatening letters as well. It was clear that he was not mentally stable. Jamie filed a complaint against Joelle, claiming that she was abusive toward their son, which led the authorities to pass the complaint to the police, triggering an investigation into Joelle. She was arrested, but a week later, it was concluded that no violence had occurred, and she was released. Despite this, Jamie had achieved his goal of making Joelle suffer. The trial for Jamie began in 2017. Throughout his time in prison, he maintained his innocence, but 3 days before the trial, he gave an interview to a journalist who worked for a local radio station. She wanted to learn about Jamie's life. In the interview, Jamie appeared with numerous tattoos covering his arms, face, and neck, most of which imitated the character of the Joker. One of the last tattoos was a 5-pointed inverted star in the center of his forehead, a symbol known in pop culture as satanic. However, Jamie was never a Satanist, and of course the murder was not ritualistic. During the interview, Jamie, with an absolutely calm face, stated that he had taken a life and that his only motive was a desire to do so. He simply wanted to seize the opportunity. Jamie recounted horrific details that were not published, as the journalist and her editor came to an agreement that some things should remain confidential. She felt that these details were too gruesome and should not be revealed to Yvette's family. Thus, they only aired certain fragments of the interview, in which Jamie spoke about his childhood and not much about the murder of Yvette. Jamie mentioned that he had been interested in cruelty since childhood, starting with insects and rats. Once, when he was left home alone, a pet ended up in the freezer and later in the oven. He said that he derived a lot of pleasure from that day and realized that he enjoyed it. Cruel, horrific acts brought him more pleasure than anything else in the world. This seemed monstrous to everyone. He also mentioned that due to the violence of his stepfather in childhood, he lost the ability to feel pain and happiness. His classmates joked and told stories that made them laugh, but he couldn't even smile, even when he knew it was funny. He never felt the need to express this through a smile. Jamie also said that he did not feel joy when something good happened to him, such as receiving a high grade in school. He enjoyed feeling pain, as it pleased him. Besides, Jaime stated that Yvette was not his first victim. The previous year, he had killed a man and a woman. He did not provide any details, only stating that the woman was 32 and the man was 27, and that he had hidden the evidence very well so that no one would find out. He claimed that the events were intentional and that he left evidence on purpose so that he would be sent to prison, as he no longer wanted to be in society. He mentioned that there were other people like him who had been his mentors. He spent so much time with the corpse of one of his first victims that the body began to decompose. Jamie looked at the corpse to ensure that the image would remain in his memory for a long time. He also implied in the interview that his choice of victims was not based on age, gender, or occupation. What mattered to him was only that they were human. Jamie claimed that he did this by himself and was proud of it, regardless of the consequences. Perhaps one of the most important phrases he said was, "I have no sympathy. I am a sadist. I will do it again, again." The trial against Jamie began, and the prosecution presented a wealth of evidence, including photographs from the crime scene. Yvette's family was present in court and was warned that they would see some unpleasant images. Yvette's sister even said that it was impossible to identify Yvette's body in the photographs, and it still affected her. Despite being accused of a serious crime, Jamie laughed loudly, spoke with a smirk, and looked at Yvette's family without being able to behave seriously throughout all the court sessions. Of course, this is upsetting not only to the victim's family, but to everyone present. After many trials, Jamie's lawyer suggested a plea deal. If he pleaded guilty, he would avoid a death sentence, which would bring some relief to Yvette's family and others affected. March 28, 2017, Jaime Osuna pleads guilty to 6 charges. On May 14, 2017, during a hearing in which he taunted Yvette's family, smirking and rolling his eyes as they described the torment he had caused in their lives, Jaime was sentenced to life in prison without parole, along with mandatory rehabilitation therapy. He gave a thumbs up as Judge John S. Summers handed down the sentence. He agreed to the terms, believing that it would not significantly impact him. Jamie was then transferred to a state prison in Corcoran, located 350 kilometers from Sacramento, California. Everyone hoped this would be the conclusion of this tragic story, but unfortunately, it took a darker turn. While he was in prison, Jamie displayed violent behavior. He got into fights, harmed other inmates, and clashed with prison guards. As a result, he was deemed a threat to others and placed in isolation. Jamie spent 23 hours a day confined to his cell, with only 1 hour allotted for outdoor time when no other inmates were present. During that hour, he would walk in circles, which was his only way to cope with the situation. On March 7, 2019, he was assigned a new cellmate, Luis Romero, a 44-year-old man who had been transferred from another prison in California. Luis had a criminal history involving gang affiliations and the murder of a woman when he was a teenager. After serving 27 years in prison, he was close to being released. It remains unclear why he was placed in the same cell as Jamie. Just 2 days later, on the morning of March 9, only 1 inmate was found alive. When prison staff conducted a routine check at 7:30 a.m., they were shocked to find Jamie's cell drenched in blood. Luis's body was in a grotesque position, and Jaime wears a necklace made from the body parts of fellow prisoner. The walls of the cell were marked with red messages. "I am not crazy. I just think differently." And, "You will never be alone. You will never be sad. You can always dance with me." Jamie used a metal blade he had concealed in his cell to commit the violent act. It was revealed that the prison staff did not perform night patrols, which made it easier for Jamie to carry out his plan. Many were shocked not only by the brutality of the act, but also by the fact that a dangerous criminal was placed in a cell with another inmate after previously being in isolation. Justin Sterling, the lawyer representing Luis's family, filed a lawsuit against the California prison, arguing that an inmate known for his violent behavior should not have been housed with a cellmate. In court, Jamie proclaimed his innocence regarding the murder charge. At his lawyer's request, a psychiatric evaluation was conducted, leading to a diagnosis of an unspecified type of schizophrenia, antisocial personality disorder, and borderline personality disorder. Consequently, the court deemed Jamie insane and unable to stand trial, sentencing him to a psychiatric program at Salinas Valley State Prison for treatment before any trial could occur. Jaime Osuna is a cruel man with a harsh upbringing who has shown a desire to take lives from a young age. It's surprising that he was placed with a cellmate. Because of this error, another person lost their life. Although it could be argued that he had 4 victims, only 2 have been officially confirmed. Serial killers often exaggerate their victim count to feel more important or to instill greater fear. At present, there are no clues and no bodies have been discovered, so nothing further can be confirmed. Regardless, no one can deny the horror of this case. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Mary Catherine Edwards. Before the advent of modern DNA research techniques, building a criminal database was challenging, making the investigation and tracing of crimes less effective. However, recent technological advances have led to the development of sophisticated tools that can help identify criminals who have been on the run for years. Now, no one can evade justice. On January 14, 1995, the Edwards family had a planned gathering. Saturday dinners together were a cherished tradition for the parents and their two daughters. So, when one of the twin sisters, Mary, was missing, it raised immediate concerns. Mary Catherine, 31, did not attend the dinner and did not answer calls from her family members, who were trying to reach her from the restaurant. Frustrated, they decided to go to Mary's home in Beaumont, Texas, where she was living at the time. When Mary's mother arrived at the house, she became worried upon finding the door unlocked. Inside, they heard running water but received no response to their calls. The bathroom was flooded, and Mary was discovered unresponsive in distressing conditions. Her sister, Allison, immediately called the police to report that she had found Mary's lifeless body. The sisters were twins, raised in Texas, and were the only children in the Edwards family. The loss of one was a devastating shock. They had always been inseparable, kind-hearted, and dedicated to helping others, especially children. After graduating high school, both sisters pursued careers as teachers and worked at the same school. They were so similar that students and faculty often confused them. At the time of her death, Mary was 31 years old and thriving in her career. Known for her bright personality, her murder sparked widespread outrage and anger. Mary was cherished by her students, many of whom felt a close bond with her. Hundreds of children, relatives, and friends attended her funeral, with many students mourning the loss of a woman who had been a vital source of support in their challenging lives. Some were in tears upon hearing the news of her passing. Parents urged detectives to take action against the criminal responsible for the brutal death of Mary. The community was horrified by the circumstances surrounding her death. Mary was found handcuffed in the bathroom, indicating that she had been abused. The bathtub was filled with blood, showing that she had fought back against her attacker, as evidenced by defensive wounds on her hands and body. Traces of the assault suggested that it occurred in her bedroom, where evidence was found on the bedding. Investigators suspected that Mary might have known her attacker, as there were no signs of forced entry into her home. The townspeople, who knew Mary well, cooperated with detectives, eager to identify the person responsible for such a horrific crime. Given the brutality and circumstances, detectives focused their investigation on her close acquaintances, believing there could be a personal motive. It was initially thought that Mary might have drowned, but an autopsy revealed that her lungs did not contain enough water, suggesting that water only entered her lungs after she had died. The true cause of death was asphyxiation, as indicated by distinct marks on her neck, and injuries suggesting she had been tightly restrained with great force until she could no longer resist. Forensic experts meticulously reconstructed the crime scene by examining the victim's house, starting with the bathroom and then moving to the bedroom. They collected a significant amount of evidence. The most alarming item found was the Smith & Wesson handcuffs that the victim had been restrained with, which resembled those used by police. This discovery left law enforcement officials confused, raising suspicions about whether someone connected to the police or a security worker might have had a personal relationship with the victim. The emotional impact of the case was deeply felt by everyone involved. In the weeks following the crime, detectives attempted to trace the serial number of the handcuffs, but their efforts were unsuccessful. By this time, the primary suspect had shifted to David Perry, the ex-boyfriend of Mary. Even though Mary was attractive and sociable, she maintained a small circle of close friends and had a few ex-lovers. She dedicated most of her time to her work and her students, leaving little room for a personal life. It was discovered that David Perry was the only person who might have had keys to her house. This raised concerns that he could have been stalking her and visiting her home out of jealousy or revenge. David agreed to cooperate with the police and provide everything needed for the examination. While waiting for the results, detectives interviewed mutual acquaintances of the couple, and everyone described David as a completely harmless person, showing no signs of aggression. He had no prior criminal record, history of violent or abuse offenses. Additionally, David Perry presented solid evidence of his alibi. He was not even in town on the night of the murder, as confirmed by multiple witnesses. David fully cooperated with the investigation, voluntarily provided DNA samples, and did not exhibit any characteristics of a criminal. Forensic analysis confirmed that the DNA did not match, leading to his removal from the list of suspects. Unfortunately, that was where the investigation stalled. Others in the victim's close circle also did not fit the criminal profile and had solid alibis. Although investigators had a lot of materials for analysis, the forensic technology at the time was insufficient to make further progress. The unsuccessful search continued for years. The situation changed significantly 23 years later, in 2018, with the introduction of a DNA analysis method that utilized genealogy. This method allowed investigators to find potential matches by examining relatives of the suspected. Law enforcement turned to the GEDmatch program, which collects DNA from Americans who voluntarily submit their samples, creating a large database. This database was instrumental in solving long-standing unsolved cases. When Detective Brandon Bess was advised to revisit the old cases, he immediately recalled the unsolved murder of Mary Edwards, which had troubled him for years. In April 2020, DNA samples from the scene related to Mary were sent to a lab at Othram for analysis. Here, many matches were found with the relatives of the killer. This marked the beginning of building a family tree related to the suspect. The number of names that needed analysis was overwhelming, totaling several thousand individuals. At this point, the detective's wife, who had a keen interest in genealogy, decided to assist with the investigation. She dedicated her free time to carefully examining matches from this extensive list. This task required precision, as each name needed to be evaluated accurately to ensure their efforts were worthwhile. Additionally, the investigators reviewed the diaries of Mary. It was believed that the victim may have had an obsessive admirer who harmed her out of unrequited love. Despite a thorough examination of the diary entries following the crime, no significant leads were uncovered. They then chose to cross-reference the names mentioned in the diaries with those in the genealogical records. During this process, the surname Lapointe began to come to light. The first identified relative of the murderer was Shara Lapointe. When contacted, Shara revealed that she is a well-known expert in genealogy and genetics. With decades of experience in her field, Shara had previously worked on challenging cases. Notably, she successfully identified one of the women buried along a state highway in the infamous Texas Fields of Death. Now, she was eager to apply her expertise to help solve other crimes, including the mystery surrounding Mary Edwards' death. She was prepared to assist with the investigation, even though it meant examining her own family members, which could lead to unsettling discoveries. As she began her analysis, she felt a sense of dread while checking the backgrounds of her own siblings, aware that the results might have serious implications. She needed to review about 7,500 names. Each individual on this list was examined slowly, requiring her to gather and process information about them and their relatives before either adding them to the family tree or discarding them. This process took several hours for each person. Over 3 months, detectives and Shara Lapointe devoted all their free time to searching for the criminal. Eventually, they found a promising lead, a couple living in Beaumont who matched the profile of the murderer's family. They have 2 sons who attended Forest Park High School, the same school Mary attended as a child. This led to 2 main suspects, Michael Foreman and Clayton Foreman. Michael did not match the age profile for the time of the crime. After checking, He was found to have no criminal record or history of aggressive behavior, so he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Clayton's situation was different. He had known Mary Edwards from high school and was closer in age to her. Furthermore, he had a criminal record for abuse, making him a strong suspect. In 1981, a 19-year-old girl reported to the police that Clayton Foreman had tied her hands and abused her. The details of that crime were strikingly similar to the incident involving Mary that occurred nearly 15 years later, with the key difference being that the first victim survived. She had also attended Forest Park High School, while Clayton was a manager at that time. The incident was effectively concealed, leading to Clayton receiving a suspended sentence and a fine. At that time, there were no police databases containing DNA samples, and he was not required to provide any. This lack of evidence is why Clayton was not identified during the investigation into the death of Diana Coe, his girlfriend of 3 years, with whom he had been planning to marry. Although Diana described him as a nice guy, it seems she did not truly know him. Less than 3 months before their wedding, she discovered the details of his abuse charge, the suspended sentence, and the fine, prompting her to want to end their engagement. However, Clayton, a manipulative liar, convinced her that it was all a misunderstanding. He avoided discussing the issue but created a believable narrative. Diana, eager to believe him, prioritized her relationship over her safety, which turned out to be a mistake. They went ahead with the marriage despite warnings from her family. When Diana and Clayton were married for just over 11 years, Diana claimed that Clayton frequently lied about his significant financial issues. She also observed that he had an unusual obsession with police handcuffs and law enforcement tools, even hanging a pair of handcuffs from the rearview mirror of his car. By the time Mary was killed, Diana had already divorced Clayton. She recalled calling him in tears to share the news, but she was taken aback by his indifferent response. He continued the conversation as if nothing had happened and then hung up. It became evident that he was likely not overly concerned about the situation. He was probably connected to the events that had transpired. The suspect was now 60 years old and no longer lived in Beaumont. He had been located in a small town called Reynoldsburg, Ohio, which had a population of a few thousand. At that time, Clayton was working as a driver. Investigators were able to find his address and all necessary information. Now they needed to collect his DNA for analysis. They set up surveillance on the suspect's house. A local police officer even took his trash, which was sent to a forensic lab. DNA from Clayton was discovered on a beer bottle found in the garbage. The match was nearly 100%. A significant finding indicated that the investigation was nearly complete after all these years. The next step was to confront the suspect. The detectives in charge of the case traveled to Ohio and devised a plan to lure Clayton into a trap. Since he was a driver, they decided to approach him about a fictitious lost item that a client was supposedly searching for. On April 29, 2021, Clayton was summoned to the police precinct under the pretense of discussing a lost wallet. He agreed to come in voluntarily. For the first time in 26 years since a brutal murder, the suspected perpetrator was in the interrogation room. The detectives informed him about the murder of Mary Edwards. This news shocked him, but Clayton attempted to maintain his composure and initially denied knowing her. The detectives then showed him a wedding photo of his first wife, which included Mary and her twin sister as bridesmaids. This reminded him that Mary had indeed attended his wedding, as his wife had invited her. From the beginning, Clayton became visibly nervous as the detectives bombarded him with questions, revealing inconsistencies in his story. The detectives focused on his vulnerabilities, hoping to obtain a confession. Clayton insisted that he was unaware of Mary's death and claimed he had never been to her house. However, these statements were quickly refuted by his ex-wife. Despite the evidence, Clayton continued to deny any connection to Mary, which seemed to be a defensive reaction. He also denied having had intimate relations with her, But this was proven false when DNA samples matching his were found on her body. The realization that his DNA was discovered on her underwear and body left him bewildered. When he was arrested for the murder of Mary Edwards, he insisted on having a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the investigators. In a symbolic gesture of victory in this long-standing case, Clayton Foreman was handcuffed with the same type of cuffs that had been found on Mary. On March 12, 2024, over 29 years after the murder of Mary, Beaumont prosecutor Patrick Knauth and colleagues Mike Laird, Sonny Eckhart are ready to go to trial. The absence of a lawyer limited his options. Weak attempts to invoke the statute of limitations were unsuccessful. Clayton Foreman remained obstinately silent, neither confessing to the murder nor defending himself in court. For everyone involved in the investigation, emotions ran high. Cheryl LaPointe worried that the Claytons' family would resent her for participating in Clayton's arrest. Nevertheless, she received support, with others expressing concern for her safety leading up to the court hearings. Cheryl felt it was her duty to uncover the truth behind the cold-blooded murder, regardless of the personal costs. One of the key witnesses for the prosecution was the twin sister of Mary, Allison, who emotionally recounted how Clayton took away the person she loved most. Even after many years, she still bore a striking resemblance to her sister. During the trial, the prosecution brought in experts in genealogy and genetics, along with forensic laboratory specialists, to explain advanced DNA analysis techniques to the jurors. It was crucial to demonstrate that relative matching methods were reliable. The prosecution also focused on women who had been impacted by Clayton's actions. One of his former colleagues testified, sharing her observations of Clayton's unusual interest in police items at work. As his subordinate who handled documents, she often opened his desk drawer and found a pair of handcuffs. Although she found this odd, she didn't feel comfortable asking him about it, thinking it was just one of his quirks. The defendant's last wife shared how she discovered many dress-revealingly photos of underage girls. When she confronted Clayton about them, he responded calmly, saying he needed them to fantasize about taking away their innocence. He then laughed, dismissing it as a failed joke. Despite these disturbing revelations, Clayton continued to evade justice. One of his victims, Diana Coe, also attended the trial. She believed in his guilt and testified for the prosecution. It was during this time that she learned about another victim and realized the full extent of her ex-husband's cruelty. However, she pointed out that during their 11 years of marriage, he did not display such behaviors during their intimate moments and never crossed reasonable boundaries in their relationship. The first victim of Clayton's assault provided a detailed testimony about her experience. At the time, she was 19 years old and just months away from his wedding to Diana. One night, while driving home along a dirt road, her car got stuck. Suddenly, a civilian car pulled up, and a man claiming to be a police officer got out to offer her help. Feeling helpless, she accepted his assistance. However, as she stepped out of her car, he attacked her, tied her hands behind her back, and threatened her with a knife, saying he would slit her throat if she resisted. Clayton abused her. Surprisingly, afterward, he became more gentle, even driving her home. During the ride, he asked her not to cry, tried to comfort her, and expressed remorse for what had happened, claiming he didn't want to hurt her. This sudden shift in his demeanor was unsettling, especially considering the violent behavior he had just exhibited. At that time, she reported the incident to the police, but she was fearful. In court, she mentioned that she had forgiven her attacker and harbored no resentment towards him. She did not wish to harm Clayton. She believed he truly regretted his actions and would not reoffend. This perspective contributed to the light punishment he received. Now the first victim feels guilty, thinking that if Clayton had been imprisoned, it might have prevented the murder of Mary. Additionally, another victim testified against the defendant in court. Previously, she had been too afraid to contact law enforcement. This woman was also a friend of Diana, with whom she had stayed in touch during school. According to her testimony, Clayton attacked her one evening in 2006 while she was living alone in her apartment. Their past friendship allowed her to communicate with him, and he initially appeared to be an ordinary guy until his darker side emerged. One evening, Clayton visited her apartment and revealed that he was struggling financially and having marital issues. He was convincing, expressing a need for someone to understand and listen to him without judgment. Feeling sympathetic, she let him in. However, once she turned her back, he attacked her, held a gun to her head, threatened her, and assaulted her. He also used handcuffs during the attack. After it was over, Clayton surprisingly softened, apologized, and asked her not to report the incident to the police. She was scared, so she did not file charges against him. Following that night, Clayton did not reach out to her at all. It's important to note that his assaults were strikingly similar to a situation that could have occurred with Mary Edwards. Unlike previous victims, however, Mary fought back against his attack. The prosecution's witnesses testified for 7 days, while the defense presented no evidence. The defense attorney claimed that although Clayton might be an abuser, there was no proof that he was also a murderer. The defense suggested that Clayton's limited options might have influenced the situation. They acknowledged incidents involving other women, stating that Clayton typically did not act aggressively towards his wives, except for his fetish involving handcuffs. After hearing the prosecution's arguments, the jurors went to deliberate. They found Clayton Foreman guilty of murdering Mary Catherine Edwards. He received a life sentence. Clayton is eligible for parole in 2061. By then, he will be 101 years old. The jurors stated that it was not merely the testimonies from the traumatized women that led to their decision. Rather, it was the forensic experts' analysis of DNA evidence showing a nearly 100% match with Clayton Foreman's DNA that confirmed their conviction. The experts provided such a thorough explanation of the principles of modern forensic methodologies that it was difficult to find more convincing words. The convict also refused to admit his guilt until the end, even in the face of evidence regarding the abuse. Naturally, against this background, he never revealed the details of his heinous crime. Nevertheless, there remained even more horrifying questions. For many years, Clayton managed to skillfully hide his malicious nature from everyone around him, even from the women he lived closely with. Most people around him had no idea that he was capable of murder. Authorities suspected that he might have been involved in a significantly larger number of bloody crimes that remained unsolved. Clayton Foreman is in state prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2061, of course, if he lives that long. He continues to keep silent, while authorities do not lose hope that he will eventually reveal his secrets. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Natalie Henderson. In 2016, Natalie Henderson celebrated her 17th birthday. She lived in Roswell, while her friend Carter Davis, also 17, was from nearby Woodstock. Although they both attended high school, they attended different schools. For 3 years, Natalie was part of the custodial team at her school, motivated by her aspirations of becoming a lifeguard. Friends described Natalie as cheerful, outgoing, engaging, and confident. She was an active young woman who loved to sing and play the guitar, and she spent hundreds of hours volunteering to help animals. Carter Davis volunteered at a local animal shelter and was a member of both the football and lacrosse teams at his school. Coaches often praised his athletic abilities and encouraged him to play in college. With his energetic and cheerful personality, he was known for always smiling and encouraging his teammates, especially when they faced challenges. Both teenagers had promising futures ahead of them, but tragically, their lives came to an abrupt end one day. At around 6 a.m. on Monday, August 1, 2016, a delivery driver arrived at a supermarket to unload his groceries. However, he noticed something unusual. To reach the unloading area, he had to go around 2 cars parked oddly in the square, which was strange, as there had never been any cars or strangers there before. As he approached, he saw two bodies lying motionless on the pavement, surrounded by blood. Panicked, he immediately called emergency services. When the police arrived, they quickly identified the victims as 17-year-old Natalie Henderson and her friend Carter Davis. Both had been shot in the head, and Natalie was found wearing nothing, raising suspicions that she may have been abused. The crime scene indicated a homicide, with no signs of a struggle or weapons nearby. It appeared that the young victims had been shot unexpectedly. The area was secured, and forensic experts began their investigation. The teens were due to return to school in just over a month. However, instead of focusing on their senior year, their parents had to prepare for their funerals. Both schools that Natalie and Carter attended announced a day of mourning and held a fundraiser to support their families. The news of their deaths shocked everyone who knew them, as well as the residents of this quiet town. Natalie and Carter were active, friendly young people who volunteered and participated in sports. They had no known enemies or critics. On the day the bodies were found, 2 candlelight vigils were held in loving memory of the deceased, with hopes that the police would quickly apprehend the person responsible for such a horrific act. In their grief, the city's residents were in a state of panic. They did not know what to think or whether a dangerous criminal could strike again. The media circulated rumors and inaccurate information from the police, which only added to the public's anxiety. The police concluded that Natalie and Carter had been in a secluded area behind the supermarket between 2 and 3 a.m., just hours before their bodies were discovered by a motorist. The condition of the bodies and initial signs from the autopsy supported this time frame. Their parents believed the young couple had been home and asleep, raising the question of why they were in that area so late at night. After interviewing Natalie and Carter's friends, the police learned that they had run away to meet each other. They had been in a relationship but kept it a secret because they feared their families would disapprove due to their young age. As a result, they would meet in isolated locations in the evenings and at night. A witness who had passed by the supermarket about 30 minutes before the bodies were found reported that he had not noticed anything unusual at the time. He did not provide specific details and admitted that he may have missed important information due to the darkness. To gather more information, he contacted the public. The most interesting point was the time between 2 and 3 in the morning, which could greatly assist the investigation. Surveillance camera footage from the crime scene was available, with several recordings made at the same time. The area is usually busy only during business hours, and there is very little activity at night. It was clear that the video cameras were essential for safety, as the isolated and dark street was an ideal location for crime. The police noted that the location could attract young people, and nearby 24-hour restaurants were also considered potential meeting places. Several popular establishments were in the vicinity, including a well-known steakhouse. The police requested footage from these restaurants and began analyzing the recordings. However, they were unable to find any teenagers in the footage from inside these establishments. This suggests that Natalie and Carter were not there to eat but simply to spend some private time together. They posed no threat to anyone and were in a secluded area. Therefore, they may have been victims of random violence or involved in something more sinister. The family stated that the victims had no legal problems and were not involved in any suspicious groups related to alcohol or illegal drugs. They were not engaged in any business activities, and Natalie even volunteered to help teenagers struggling with addiction. The police were certain that the victims were not killed elsewhere, as they found no evidence that they had been dragged or transported in a vehicle. Initially, the police focused on drugs as a possible motive. This idea gained public support because the abandoned area around the supermarket appeared to be a hotbed of illegal activity. However, after 2 days, this theory was dismissed. Surveillance footage from the supermarket helped police identify the killer, described as a thin man with long, unkempt hair. Unfortunately, the footage did not capture his face or license plate number. However, the police were able to identify the suspect before Natalie and Carter's funerals. Police investigated and found that the suspect had used Natalie's debit card at a store near her home and at a gas station. Surveillance cameras captured him, and his cell phone's geolocation data was examined. He was actually near the supermarket at the time of the double murder. Police identified and arrested the suspect, 20-year-old Jeffrey Hazelwood, just a few miles from the crime scene. Initially, police were unsure of Jeffrey's motives, but they believed he acted alone. Multiple government agencies, including the FBI, were involved in the investigation. At around 5 a.m., police arrested Jeffrey at a gas station without any resistance. At the time, Jeffrey lived with his maternal grandparents, who adopted him when he was very young. Little is known about him, making it important to understand what might have driven him to kill Natalie and Carter. He was found to be an active social media user, with police and psychologists noting signs of internal struggles in his posts. The evening before the double murder, he shared a caption photo that read, "Always remember that you are unique, completely unique like everyone else." Some of his posts also contained darker themes and expressed thoughts of ending his life. Jeffrey's grandparents mentioned that he had been in legal trouble for years. A year earlier, he had been sent to a special academy for troubled youth due to his criminal activities. He was involved in a gang, and his grandparents reported that Jeffrey sometimes acted out to the point where they feared for their safety. Jeffrey's mother had separated from his biological father before he was born. During her pregnancy, she used illegal drugs, which negatively affected Jeffrey. From the beginning, she paid little attention to him and essentially abandoned him. As a result, he was sent to live with his grandparents, who lived near the site of the double murder. They were very religious and cared for Jeffrey as best they could, but he did not behave like a devoted grandson. Jeffrey's mother was ordered to pay $40 a week in child support, but she skipped the payments. This led her parents to take legal action, claiming that she owed over $12,000 in child support when Jeffrey was only 9 years old. Eventually, Jeffrey's mother began to care for her son and visited him twice a month. They attempted to set up a time to meet to help her learn how to care for a child, hoping to reunite and allow her to take on a more active parenting role in the future. However, according to Jeffrey's grandparents, he continued to have ongoing problems. In March 2011, Jeffrey failed to report to the police when he was under supervision. His maternal grandparents provided police with a note from Jeffrey stating that he planned to go into the wilderness to survive for a few days. However, he was carrying a 9mm pistol. After a few months, the police decided not to pursue the case further. Eventually, another family conflict arose. Jeffrey ran away again after several days of inappropriate behavior. After his arrest, he promised to behave, but a few months later, he was reported again for swinging a sword in his yard. When the police arrived, Jeffrey explained that he was practicing karate and was doing so outside behind a fence to avoid hurting anyone. However, his maternal grandparents told the police that Jeffrey was behaving inappropriately and posed a danger. Unfortunately, there was still no way to prove any malicious intent. In April 2013, Jeffrey's grandmother contacted the police again, reporting that about 6 weeks earlier, Jeffrey had threatened to blow up a building. Initially, the police did not take these threats seriously, but it soon became clear that the boy was preparing for something. Jeffrey's grandmother became suspicious when she discovered a sword and several knives on him. In February 2015, Jeffrey was charged with weapon theft. It is important to note that until the end, Jeffrey had not shown any aggression toward others and had not harmed his grandparents or strangers. Therefore, the violent actions that led to the deaths of Natalie and Carter shocked the boy's family. After the incident, one of Jeffrey's close friends spoke to the police, explaining that the boy was not a bad person by nature but had struggled with mental illness for many years. These mental health issues contributed to the tragic attack on the loving couple. Although Jeffrey was generally a caring and loving person, he changed dramatically when he began hearing voices in his head. Jeffrey often shared his struggles with a close friend. His issues began in elementary school and led to behavioral problems in high school. It got so bad that he was homeschooled and barely attended school during those years. About 4 months before the shooting, Jeffrey received a diagnosis indicating that he suffered from schizophrenia and other mental health issues. Although he had been on medication for a while, he stopped shortly before the incident, believing that he was getting better and no longer needed help. Sadly, he lost control, leading to the shooting of a stranger. The police worked tirelessly for nearly 2 days to gather details about the horrific crime. Their efforts led to charges being filed, and the trial began just 1 day after Jeffrey was arrested. The results of the forensic examination shed more light on the massacre. Forensic experts found no traces of male fluids on Natalie's body, but some of the injuries raised concerns about possible abuse. Natalie was shot at close range, while Carter was shot at medium range on the left side of the head. The murder weapon was never found. Before the hearing, Jeffrey claimed that he was not involved in the massacre but was merely a witness. He stated that he did not see the attacker but observed the events as they occurred. He mentioned that the girl was worth nothing when she got out of the car and that the attacker then killed them. After the shooting, the attacker took valuables from the car and the girl's purse. However, Jeffrey's testimony did not match the evidence, as surveillance camera footage revealed the actual details of the crime. Later, during a second interview, Jeffrey changed his story. He claimed that a stranger behind the supermarket was responsible. He alleged that this stranger threatened Natalie and Carter with a weapon and forced them out of the car. Jeffrey stated that he had a brief conversation with Carter before the shooting began. He claimed that the girl exited the car at the attacker's request, who then assaulted her on the hood before shooting her. However, this version was also deemed implausible, as police knew that no one else was involved. It was all Jeffrey himself, as shown in the video. During a third interview, Jeffrey confessed to the truth of the events. He admitted to committing all the crimes he had previously mentioned. New information came to light, indicating that he forced the couple out of the car while they were partially undressed. He shot Carter first, then forced Natalie to remove her shirt and underwear. He abused her on the hood of his car before killing her. According to him, he killed Carter first because he thought the young man was strong and capable of defending himself. It is unclear why Jeffrey committed the crime. He stated that he had moved out of his grandparents' house a few days earlier after being expelled from school due to his erratic behavior. He took his belongings, including the clothes he wore during the murder, which were later found hidden at his girlfriend's house, where he had been staying before the incident. Jeffrey's diary contained disturbing entries, including frightening thoughts about killing. His grandparents expressed fear for him. Just before the tragedy, he had mentioned end-life thoughts and a desire to harm others. Based on the evidence gathered, the prosecutor's office filed 12 charges against Jeffrey, including aggravated double murder, abuse, burglary, and illegal possession of a weapon. During the trial, Jeffrey appeared disheveled and unwell. His long hair partially obscured his face, and bystanders observed him mumbling to himself. His behavior became increasingly erratic, with footage showing him fondling an imaginary object on his leg. After a preliminary hearing, Jeffrey was denied bail. His attorney described him as extremely frightened and said he did not fully understand what was happening. The attorney, who took on the case pro bono, believes that everyone deserves legal representation. The defense focused primarily on Jeffrey's mental health, as independent experts had diagnosed him with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The preliminary hearing was originally scheduled for September 9th but was postponed to October 28th. The prosecutor's office intends to pursue the death penalty for the double murder. When Jeffrey appeared in court, he reported that he had not been given his psychiatric medication while in prison. He claimed that he had repeatedly contacted the medical team for medication but had been ignored. The hearing was adjourned again, this time to February of the following year. While Jeffrey appeared unwell during the preliminary hearing, he told the jury otherwise. Jeffrey had been hearing voices for a long time. Some of these voices sounded like demons, while others sounded like friends. He believed he was receiving messages from God through the television and felt as though he was being watched through the walls. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a mental illness that includes symptoms of both schizophrenia and mood disorders, and usually appears during adolescence. Jeffrey also had a long history of mental health problems. In 2001, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. He struggled with anger management, which led to multiple hospitalizations in 2012 and 2013. With the help of appropriate medication, Jeffrey was able to appear in court and eventually grasp the proceedings. His doctor testified in court that Jeffrey experienced voices, hallucinations, and paranoia. Given the circumstances, Jeffrey pleaded guilty by reason of insanity, arguing that he was not in control of his actions when he attacked the two young men. The parents of the victims shared that even in their short lives, Natalie and Carter made a significant impact by dedicating their time to helping others, in stark contrast to their killer. While in prison awaiting trial, Jeffrey attempted to write letters of apology to the victims' families several times. However, he was only able to do so after his health improved with medication. The jury ultimately found him guilty, and Jeffrey Haywood received a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Elizabeth Espino Vasquez. Elizabeth Vasquez Marin was born in a city located in the Cajamarca department of Peru. Her parents were 6 children. The parents loved them all dearly and worked incredibly hard to raise their children in prosperity. Elizabeth's childhood was happy and cheerful, as is often the case in a family with many children. She got along well with her 5 siblings. During her university studies, Elizabeth met a young man, Alejandro Espino, whom she married in 1987. A year later, they had their first and only daughter, whom they named Elizabeth Espino Vasquez, affectionately called Alida by everyone. By that time, both Alida's parents were balancing family life with their careers. Elizabeth began to develop her career as a lawyer, studying 2 majors simultaneously at university in Lima, while her husband was also working toward his career as a lawyer. Years later, his career advancement led him to the position of prosecutor in the fight against corruption. The hectic pace of life left them with almost no time to care for their little girl, who, during the first 4 years of her life, was raised by her grandparents on her mother's side. They provided her with the love that her parents could not, and additionally, Alida grandparents' youngest daughter was Alida's age, allowing them to grow up like sisters. Every birthday of Alida's was celebrated like a grand holiday and served as a wonderful reason for the whole family to gather. At every family event, Alida was always by her aunt's side. The 2 girls constantly played pranks together and were never scolded. Instead, they were spoiled and had their wishes fulfilled, which led to them being jokingly labeled as spoiled. When Alida turned 4, her parents decided, in her best interests, to move to the Lima department since it was time for her to start kindergarten and they wanted her to have access to quality education from an early age. Moreover, moving to the capital afforded Alida other privileges. To make up for the time she could not spend with her only daughter, her mother showered Alida with various gifts, leading her to live like a queen. She had the best toys, designer clothes, trips abroad, and a top-notch education. Additionally, Maureen indulged all her whims. Despite this, the little girl often felt out of place, unable to rely on her mother's company, who was busy managing several businesses. Nevertheless, Maureen tried to spend all her free time with Alida. Eventually, they grew so close that they resembled best friends. Unfortunately, this closeness vanished without a trace when Alida reached her teenage years. In an instant, she transformed into a problematic teen, and the first warning sign was her plummeting school performance, despite having always been the best student. Shortly thereafter, constant quarrels with her mother ensued. Alida's resentment began to fester because everyone around her admired her mother, specifically, her mother's success at work, beauty, and gentle demeanor. Alida did not possess the same physical attributes as her mother, which consumed her with strong jealousy. At every opportunity, she would question why she looked so different from her mother. In an attempt to reconnect with her daughter, Elizabeth continued to indulge her desires and shower her with gifts. Among these requests were plastic surgeries and other measures aimed at enhancing Alita's beauty. Elizabeth supported and financed these efforts in hopes that Alita's confidence and self-esteem would improve, but the girl remained unsatisfied. Her hatred for her mother only deepened. Elizabeth and Alejandro's divorce in 2007 only exacerbated the situation. Alita blamed her mother for it all, and her resentment intensified. Around the same time, Alita began dating a young man named Fernando González Asenjo, whom she met at a Mormon church in the San Isidro area. Few people knew that Fernando attended the church solely to exploit unsuspecting young believers with considerable money. His scheme was simple. He would tell wealthy young women that his family was very poor, that he lived alone with his mother, and that his father had abandoned the family when he was just a small boy. By pretending to be a good son, a victim, he evoked pity from the girls and gained their affection. Alita was no exception. In reality, Fernando was a problematic individual. He had no job, didn't even try to study, wanted an easy life. Fernando understood that Alita would easily succumb to manipulation and would support him, while Alita did not realize that Fernando was simply using her. When Elizabeth found out that her daughter was dating a young man from the church, she was happy because she thought he was a hardworking and good boy. Additionally, when Alita talked about the difficulties that Fernando had allegedly faced, Elizabeth decided to help him get his life on track. She rented him an inexpensive apartment so that he could live away from his mother and paid for his schooling, during which he was supposed to study business so that later, Maureen could offer him a job in one of her companies. However, Fernando did not take advantage of this opportunity and attended only 2 classes. When Elizabeth learned about this, she was very upset. Understanding that Fernando was dear to her daughter, she decided to give him another chance and offered him a job as a manager's assistant. Fernando missed that opportunity as well. He was fired after losing a check for a substantial amount of money, even though he was simply supposed to deliver it from one place to another. Furthermore, Fernando did not pay Elizabeth rent for the apartment, despite their agreement that she would let him live there for a minimum price, not for free. This behavior convinced Elizabeth that he was with Alita only for her money. She forbade her daughter from continuing the relationship, thinking she could break them apart. Maureen decided to send Alita to the United States for a vacation at her younger sister's house, with whom Alita had been very close in childhood. This decision turned out to be perfect. She hoped her daughter could meet other boys and forget about Fernando. Ultimately, this plan did not work, and the couple continued their long-distance relationship. Just a couple of months later, Alita returned to Lima to start studying at the law school of the Peruvian University of Applied Sciences. At the same time, Fernando moved to another apartment and began living alone, but he was able to afford this not because he found a job, but because Alita was paying all his bills. She received this money from her mother, who gave her about $450 a month for her university expenses. This amount, of course, was not enough for the lavish lifestyle Fernando hoped for. Therefore, to please her boyfriend, Alita snuck into her mother's room and stole her wallet. Elizabeth soon noticed the missing money, which led to a fierce argument between mother and daughter. Alita denied taking the money, but by that time, Elizabeth suspected that her daughter was still seeing Fernando, and the situation with the money helped confirm this. Intending to find out the truth, Elizabeth checked her daughter's computer. She found her correspondence with Fernando. In the messages, she also saw that Fernando was demanding rent payments, meals from expensive restaurants, and branded clothing from Alita. This situation was the last straw for Elizabeth. In turn, Alita interpreted this as a declaration of war. By July 2009, Elizabeth reduced the amount of money she gave her daughter for expenses and began to keep track of every penny she spent. Of course, all of this drove Alita to despair, as she could no longer indulge her boyfriend's desires. Alita's dissatisfaction grew. She wanted money, power, and freedom. She planned to achieve this at any cost, even ignoring the fact that Elizabeth was doing all of this for her sake. It was then that Alita decided to cross all boundaries and began to devise a plan to get rid of her own mother. Alita's plan was to inherit her mother's fortune, which was estimated at $4 million at that time. Additionally, Elizabeth had investments in the insurance market, owned several companies, and had several insurance policies, which Alida did not suspect. Little did she know that her mother was one step ahead in her efforts to protect her daughter from Fernando. She had rewritten her will, and in the event of her death, all her assets would go to Elizabeth's father, who would be obliged to take care of Alida. As if foreseeing what was about to happen, Elizabeth met with her parents, brothers, and sisters to inform them of her decision. She told them she was doing this for Alida, because she feared for her safety and her daughter's safety, having realized that Fernando was an unreliable person capable of causing harm for his own desires. Unfortunately, Maureen was not mistaken. While Elizabeth was doing everything possible for Alida's well-being, she was unhappy that Elizabeth did not accept her relationship with Fernando, and that Elizabeth had taken away some privileges. Alida planned to stage a kidnapping to escape with her boyfriend and use the money obtained to gain the freedom she so desperately wanted. Greed, envy, beauty, constant quarrels, the thirst for money, and Fernando's bad influence led Alida to devise a plan to murder her mother. Enlisting the help of her boyfriend Fernando and a friend of Fernando's named Jorge Cornejo Ruiz, who was 22 years old, to help them commit the crime that was to take place on the night of January 26, 2010. On that day, Alida went to work with Elizabeth and asked her for about $3 supposedly to print some university assignments. In fact, she spent that money to take a taxi home, let Fernando and his friend into their house. The guys hid in Elizabeth's room and were to wait for her return from work. Alida told them that when Elizabeth entered the room, they should immediately strangle Elizabeth as they had previously agreed. After talking to her accomplices, Alida returned to work with Elizabeth. Eventually, Alida and Elizabeth returned home around 10:30 p.m. Alida deliberately made a small noise so that Fernando and Jorge could hear. Unsuspecting, Elizabeth went up to her room and turned on the light. At that moment, Fernando, standing behind her, began to strangle Elizabeth while his accomplice Jorge held Elizabeth by her legs. Elizabeth managed to break free for a moment and resist, but Fernando quickly regained his footing, subdued her. When it was over, Alida went to the kitchen where the 19-year-old maid, Maria Liliana Huaman Chucolin, was at the time. She ordered Maria to go to her room and lock herself in there. After that, Alida returned to Elizabeth's room. While Fernando and Jorge held her down, Alida lunged at Elizabeth, began demanding money from her, forcing her to give the password to the accounts or hand over the safe's key. Until that moment, Elizabeth thought that Fernando was acting alone to take revenge on her, but upon seeing that her daughter was involved in the attack, she gathered her strength to lunge at Alida. Elizabeth managed to grab Alida by her arms and scratch her chest. When the fight was almost over, Elizabeth kicked her daughter several times in the legs. This last act enraged Alida, after which she struck her mother severely, pressed a pillow to her face to suffocate her. When Elizabeth stopped breathing, the criminals proceeded with their plan. Fernando and Jorge took the body, moved it to the trunk of Elizabeth's car. Meanwhile, Alida went to distract the guard. She talked to him and asked him to go to the pharmacy to buy some medicine. Thus, they managed to remove the body. They planned to hide it and the car to stage everything as if it were a kidnapping. The screams and sounds of the struggle were heard by the maid, which scared her greatly, but she could do nothing to help Elizabeth as Alida had locked her in and she had no way to escape the room on her own. Early in the morning at 5 a.m., Maria woke up and made orange juice for Elizabeth as she always did. At that time, Alida appeared and told her to drink the juice because her mother had already gone to work. After that, she went to her mother's workplace, where Elizabeth's accountant was already present. Alida told her that the criminals had contacted her and claimed that Elizabeth had been kidnapped. Elizabeth's accountant immediately blocked all of her boss's bank accounts to prevent the criminals from carrying out bank transfers. Jessica also noticed that Alida looked worried, that there were bruises on her arms and legs, but she did not pay much attention to it as at that moment she was only thinking about Elizabeth. She immediately reported the kidnapping to law enforcement while Alida called her relatives to tell them what had happened. When she returned to the office, she was shocked by the state of her workspace, there was chaos everywhere and many documents were scattered across the desk. At that moment, she did not notice that several important documents, including a will that Elizabeth claimed had been made a few months earlier, were missing. This will then caused a legal dispute between her relatives. While the police began investigating the disappearance from the tourist area, a horrifying message came in: an abandoned car had been found with a lifeless body inside. The body was taken to the morgue, where forensic experts conducted analyses and immediately established the cause of death as suffocation, discovering traces of violence on various parts of her body. The news of Elizabeth's death shocked her family and those around her. Everyone who knew and loved her could not believe that such a hardworking and kind woman could have been killed in such a terrible way. At the funeral, Alida appeared to be grief-stricken and inconsolable. In the following days, she displayed only cold behavior and a vacant gaze, as though she were not at all affected by her mother's death. Furthermore, she provided nonsensical explanations for what had happened that day. Her grandmother and grandfather felt that they no longer knew the girl they had raised, loved so much in her childhood. The investigation began by examining threats that Elizabeth's ex-husband had received a few months prior. He was a talented lawyer and at that time worked as a prosecutor fighting corruption. Investigators speculated that a possible reason for the disappearance could have been his significant role in the arrest of the mafia and a well-known banned substance dealer. He had powerful enemies, and their involvement seemed obvious, but the investigation in that direction led nowhere. The detectives assigned to the case then decided to focus on a person who could have been the organizer of the crime. By that time, enough evidence and conflicting witness statements had been gathered, indicating that the perpetrator could have been Alida, Elizabeth's only daughter. Despite her display of mourning at the funeral, the police had lingering suspicions, as during the interrogations, Alida provided contradictory stories. During her first interrogation, she stated that she had come home late in the evening and immediately gone to her room to study. At 2 a.m., she realized she was hungry and went down to the kitchen. When she returned, the door to her mother's room was locked, but the light was still on inside. Alida recounted that her mother had left for work early on the morning of January 27th, after which she received a call from the criminals informing her that her mother had been taken hostage and that they would release her in exchange for a ransom. Detectives managed to establish that this call never occurred. Instead, they discovered that on that day, Alida had made numerous calls to Fernando. Following this finding, they became the primary suspects in the case. When Alida was called back for questioning, she claimed that she had never argued with her mother, a statement confirmed by her father, who at the time was already a district judge and the chairman of the Supreme Court of Amazonas. He stated that their family was very close, even despite the divorce, and insisted that the reason for Elizabeth's death was revenge from her enemies, although this version had already been dismissed by authorities. Additionally, there was other evidence against Alida and Fernando. Although the criminals had wiped the fingerprints, a luminol test revealed that Elizabeth's blood had been found throughout the house. A crucial element in the investigation was the testimony of the maid, who described that terrible night, noting that she heard Elizabeth's cries for help but could not assist her because Alida had locked her in. She added that in the morning, she performed her household duties, but Alida came and said that her mother had already left for work. There is also the testimony of the guard. Later, Elizabeth's best friend testified that mother and daughter often had intense arguments, and sometimes Alida even attacked her mother. Considering all the gathered evidence and testimonies, on February 9th, the Homicide Investigation Department of the National Police of Peru appealed to the on-duty judge for the preliminary arrest of 3 suspects in this crime. Alida was arrested around noon. Just a couple of hours later, her accomplices, Fernando and Jorge, were also apprehended. During Alida's arrest, she was accompanied by her father, Alejandro Espino, and 2 defense attorneys. After Alida was placed in custody, she underwent a forensic examination, during which it was determined that she had injuries on her hands and feet that had occurred up to 10 days prior, around the time of the crime. After intensive interrogations, the first to admit responsibility was Fernando, followed by Jorge. Consequently, Alida felt she had no choice but to confess her guilt as well. Alida revealed that on the night of the maid, she distracted the guard, allowing her accomplices to break into Elizabeth's room. Furthermore, she stated that she cleaned up the crime scene and that it was Fernando who took Elizabeth's life. Alida did not conceal her motives, stating that she acted out of frustration with the imposed rules and the prohibitions on seeing her boyfriend. Meanwhile, the head of the forensic department emphasized the composure of the criminals, who confessed to committing their actions fully aware of the consequences and without being under the influence of alcohol or illegal substances. The criminals also revealed that they had planned to take Elizabeth's life several months prior when her relationship with Alida became unbearable. However, this was not the only motive. Another goal was to collect a life insurance policy worth $100,000. As new details of the case emerged and were covered in the media, public sentiment towards Alida deteriorated day by day, peaking when it became known that she was the one who initiated the crime that led to her mother's death. However, Alida's grandfather decided to visit his granddaughter in prison, hoping to hug and forgive her, as she was his blood. To his surprise, during one of these visits, Alida began to behave coldly towards him, insulting him, even telling him not to return. This occurred in March, 2 months after Elizabeth's death. Following this, he stated that Alida was now dead to him and immediately filed a lawsuit to exclude her from the inheritance due to her unworthy behavior, intending to prevent Alida from receiving her mother's inheritance. Consequently, a legal battle over the inheritance began between Alida and her family. Despite Elizabeth's relatives assuring that there was a will in favor of Alida's grandfather, this document, as previously mentioned, mysteriously disappeared from Elizabeth's office and from the city registrar's office. The accountant who worked with Elizabeth noted that the only person with access to Elizabeth's documents was her own daughter. By May of that same year, Alida initiated the process of the will from prison in an attempt to inherit her mother's estate, but she was unaware that she was not the only heir. Alejandro also filed a lawsuit, claiming that he and Elizabeth were not divorced but had merely decided to live separately and, in his opinion, he had the right to receive half of the estate as her widower. Liliana Vasquez Marin asserted that her sister and Alejandro divorced in 2007 with mutual consent and that both already had new partners. Alejandro's response was swift. He confirmed that they had indeed begun the divorce process but never finalized it, as they were concerned about their daughter and thought that finalizing the divorce might significantly impact her. Amid this inheritance dispute, another brother of Elizabeth intervened to assert that when they were handling the funeral, Alejandro was only interested in money. Additionally, he emphasized that it was too suspicious that two key documents in this case, the divorce certificate and the will in which his sister bequeathed all her property to their father, had gone missing. He also reported that Alida's father, taking advantage of his position and influence as a lawyer, publicly stated that his daughter would be sentenced to only 8 years in prison and would be released on parole after 3 years. Faced with these issues, the family lawyer provided the court with an executive document recognizing a foreign judgment, which stated that Elizabeth had divorced in the United States by mutual consent and that this document was valid in Peru. Over the next several months, Alida attempted to launch a campaign against her grandfather, choosing to slander him. She even dared to claim that he and one of her uncles were responsible for Elizabeth's death. The family was easily able to debunk these statements, asserting that Alida did this solely to harm her grandfather. Disappointment and grief gradually took a toll on his health and well-being, leading to his demise on December 27, 2011. He suffered a heart attack that resulted in his death. His remains were buried at the Campo Cemetery in Huapi, alongside those of his daughter, Elizabeth. After Alida's grandfather's death, the Vasquez family increased the number of lawsuits Alida to eliminate the possibility of them inheriting wealth. In the midst of the battles for inheritance, a lawsuit was simultaneously ongoing against Alida and her two accomplices for the death of Elizabeth. The first court hearing was scheduled for April 12 and was to take place in the 3rd Criminal Chamber for prisoners. However, the hearing was postponed until the 24th of that month after the court denied Alejandro's request to participate as a civil party in the process. When the time finally arrived for the first hearing, the suspects appeared in court dressed in black, with black nails, black pants, and a purple blouse. Alida attempted to appear calm, but her facade crumbled as soon as Ivan Melgar, the senior assistant prosecutor from the 9th prosecution of Lima, began mentioning more than 15 witnesses who would be called during the proceedings. Among these witnesses were Elizabeth's maid and the suspects, who were asked to testify about their state of mind the day before the crime was committed. The prosecution requested a repeated psychiatric evaluation for Alida after her defense requested to declare her innocent on the grounds that she had been suffering from bipolar disorder since 2007. During the debates, the deputy chief prosecutor officially filed for 30 years of imprisonment for her and the 2 other defendants, in addition to a payment of $27,000 as damages in civil proceedings. After the prosecution presented evidence, she pleaded not guilty and refused to claim any early dismissal or sentencing. On May 14, 2012, Fernando González Asenjo was sentenced to 28 years of imprisonment, and a week later, on May 21, Jorge Cornejo Ruiz received a similar sentence. While testifying, Alida accusing her former partner and his friend of planning, carrying out the attack on her mother. She also insisted that they had been hired by her uncle, who allegedly had connections to the illegal banned substance trade. This statement was supported by her father, who stated that the real criminals had exploited his daughter's mental illness to cause Elizabeth's death. Neither the victim's family nor the public believed this assertion. The trial took an unexpected turn when Fernando testified in court. During his testimony, he stated that he and Jorge had decided to commit the crime after Alida invited them to her home on January 26, 2010. Faced with this unexpected situation, the prosecution noted that Fernando's testimony contradicted his earlier statements made during the investigative phase, where he had claimed that he, Jorge, and Fernando had jointly planned the crime. Now, he had retracted his words. Given the circumstances, the prosecution announced that a confrontation would take place among the 3 suspects, mandated Jorge and Fernando to testify in court as witnesses. Eventually, Jorge provided testimony that Alida had offered him $20,000 not to speak about the events of that fateful night. Details also emerged regarding a plan devised by Fernando, in which the criminal group was supposed to go missing along with her mother, but Jorge asserted that he did not agree to be part of this plan. The Jorge's lawyer noted that it was established that his client did not participate in either planning the events that led to Elizabeth's death or in carrying out the attack. Ultimately, Alida made a shocking statement, saying that she did not regret that Fernando killed her mother, claiming she had clearly seen it and did not want to take responsibility for what he did. The lawyer also assured that Fernando's statements were spontaneous and that he had received no bribes to change his original statement. The maid, Maria Liliana, also noted that Elizabeth was against her daughter's relationship with Fernando because Elizabeth considered him a slacker. She reiterated her previous statements regarding Alida's confession and Alejandro's threats. After these testimonies, the prosecution and oversight body requested a copy of her statements to initiate an investigation against Senior Judge Alejandro in connection with the alleged threats he made toward Maria. At the time the appeal was initiated, the court granted Alida's request to recognize her as the heir to her deceased grandfather's estate. This caused outrage in the Vasquez family, who filed an appeal against the aforementioned ruling. According to the family's lawyer, it was proven that the accused was involved in the events that led to her mother's death, and that was sufficient to strip her of any chance of inheriting property from their family. Even greater uncertainty in the judicial proceedings was introduced by 4 experts tasked with establishing the psychological profile of Alida. As they reached contradictory conclusions, 2 stated that she actually had bipolar disorder affecting her ability to think clearly, while the other 2 declared that the disorder altered her emotional capabilities but not her consciousness. Consequently, she was very well aware and understood what she was doing, and she was fully responsible for her actions. One of the psychologists provided the court with drawings by Alida and printed statistics indicating that she had an above-average IQ, which suggested that she could manipulate others. Based on the results of the psychological testing, the prosecution claimed that the bipolar disorder referred to by Alita's defense was not an illness but an emotional disorder. Therefore, she should be deemed sane and receive a strict punishment. At one of the final hearings, expert testimony was presented by the specialist who examined Elizabeth. He reported that the bloodstains found in Elizabeth's car suggested that she may have still been alive when she was placed there. During his closing arguments, the senior assistant prosecutor stated that at the time of the crime, the accused was not suffering from bipolar disorder, was stable, and most likely had carefully planned everything in advance. After countless attempts by Alita, Elizabeth Espino Vasquez, to distort what happened and deny the truth, on December 24, 2012, she was found guilty of murdering her mother, Elizabeth Vasquez Marin, and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. While the judge read the sentence, she pulled out an icon and, with tears in her eyes, began to pray, tearfully declaring that the sentence was unfair. For several minutes, she spoke with her lawyer, who stated that he would appeal the verdict. The lawyer continued to insist that various clinical and psychological analyses conducted by renowned specialists showed that Alita suffered from an emotional affective disorder, and this should be taken into account during the review of the sentence. By that time, Alita was still listed as a potential heir to her grandfather's and mother's estates, was therefore continuing to process the necessary documentation to inherit them. In light of this, the Vasquez family demanded that the Fifth World Court make a ruling on the matter, as the procedure had been halted in 2011. However, over the next 8 years, all attempts by the Vasquez family to obtain a judicial decision on this matter were unsuccessful. On January 21, 2021, Alita received news of her father Alejandro's death from natural causes. To this day, legal proceedings regarding whether the Vasquez family can exclude Alita from the list of heirs are ongoing. The entire Vasquez family has stated that this situation has been a true torment for them. This case shook all of Peru, revealing that there are people who, in pursuit of their goals, do not hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way, even their own mother. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Sungnam Kwan Lisowski. Our story today focuses on the Lisowski family. John and his wife Sungnam, along with their 2 daughters, Victoria and Christine, live in a town called Aurora in the United States. John's job requires frequent international travel, including trips to Korea, as the company's headquarters are in the United States while some factories are located in other countries. During one of these trips to Korea, John met Sungnam Kwan. He quickly fell in love with her and asked her out. After several dates, they decided to get married. They married in 1983 and moved to the United States. Their first daughter, Victoria, was born in 1988, followed by Christine a few years later. Although the family seemed perfect, some people found Sungnam too strict with the children. For a long time, John reassured himself that the strict nature of Asian parenting was normal, attributing it to his wife's cultural background. However, as tensions mounted, he began to realize that something was wrong. Sungnam's expectations of the children were too high, too strict, and sometimes even harsh. John's displeasure did not affect Sungnam much. She continued to impose more rules and insisted on their strict enforcement. Notably, the children were forbidden to discuss their family with anyone outside, even their friends. Meanwhile, Victoria and Christine socialized with friends and occasionally visited their homes. During these visits, they found that their friends' parents treated them much more kindly and warmly than the constant criticism they faced at home. While their friends' mothers would bake with them on the weekends, Victoria and Christine's mother decided on their interests without ever consulting them. Every weekend, she woke Victoria and Christine up at 6 a.m. and forced them to practice the piano, scolding them even if they made the slightest mistake. If they messed up, she would hit their hands. Victoria and Christine were never praised. Even if they played perfectly, there was no encouragement. Eventually, Sungnam had to use a wooden stick to discipline them. If they relaxed for a moment or hunched over, they would be beaten by her. John disagreed with this method of education. However, Sung-nam achieved results. Victoria and Christine quickly mastered the piano, began to participate in competitions, and even won awards. However, deep down, they did not find joy in their achievements. Sung-nam convinced John that her goal was to raise gifted children and that this harsh approach was necessary. Sung-nam had a hot temper and would quickly lose control, leading to dangerous behavior. This created a tense atmosphere in the family, where even John felt uncomfortable around her. Sung-nam firmly established her dominance in the family and made all the decisions. She often intervened in conflicts, even when she was not directly involved, relishing the role of judge. This situation took place during a conflict between Christine and Victoria. The two children were arguing about something trivial. Christine quickly apologized, but Victoria, the older sister, did not accept it. This made Sung-nam unable to bear it. Ignoring Victoria and Christine's feelings, Sung-nam became angry. She stood up, walked past Victoria, and began to punish Christine. Christine was confused and did not understand why she was being beaten. Sung-nam hit her so violently that Christine's face was left bloody as she slid down the wall, unable to get up. Victoria watched in horror and began to scream an apology, begging her mother to stop. The beating only ceased when Victoria screamed. Sung-nam then turned to Victoria and warned her that if she disobeyed again, Christine would be punished. She made it clear that she would hurt little Christine every time Victoria defied Sung-nam, ensuring that Victoria would feel guilty about it. Many may wonder why John, the father of the children, did not step in to stop his wife and help his daughters. The truth is that John could not influence his wife. He was also the target of her anger. At the time of this incident, John was working late at the office, trying to avoid the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. This distance made it difficult for him to be involved in his children's lives. By the time John realized that the situation had escalated beyond normal limits, it was too late to intervene. While he was at work, his children were suffering from constant abuse at the hands of their mother. She often assaulted them. John was also involved in a number of disturbing incidents. On one occasion, Victoria went to a friend's house after school. There were obvious injuries on her body, and many suspected that something was wrong in her family, but Victoria remained silent. While she was at her friend's house, the phone rang, and Victoria was called home because something had happened. Victoria braced herself and returned to her house. As she approached, she saw her father standing at the door, talking to the police. He had a large, fresh bruise and a cut on his cheek that looked quite frightening. Victoria overheard her father's conversation with the police. He was making excuses, insisting that he had just fallen and that there was nothing to worry about. However, Victoria understood the truth of the situation. It was clear that after the initial violence, her father had tried to confront his wife to protect the children. Unfortunately, he was severely beaten, and Sung-nam even threatened him with a knife. Since then, she had completely dominated the family. John was too afraid to speak up because he feared for his own safety. Sung-nam's violent outbursts were terrifying. All the family members tried to keep their distance from her. John spent more time at work, trying to stay away from home as much as possible. He built a successful career, becoming the director of a telecommunications equipment company, and often traveled for work. Victoria and Christine followed suit, spending more time at school or with friends to avoid being at home. This situation continued until Victoria and Christine entered high school. During this time, the distance between John and Sung-nam grew. He began working longer hours, taking extra shifts, and often left the house before everyone else woke up. He would wake up early and come home later than everyone else. Unfortunately, Victoria and Christine could not escape this situation. they were still stuck in a stressful environment with their demanding mother. During this time, the cruelty towards Victoria and Christine escalated significantly. One day, an argument broke out between the two sisters. Their mother, Sun Nam, intervened by locking her daughters in a stuffy, dark garage. She forced them to sit with their hands raised for hours. When she finally opened the door, she found Victoria and Christine exhausted from the heat, but Sun Nam chose not to let them out. Instead, she refused to give them water and simply closed the door again. It was later revealed that she had gone to the store, leaving her children in that miserable situation. Victoria and Christine sat for hours in the sweltering heat, feeling miserable but too afraid to go outside, knowing that it would only make their mother angrier. One day, while driving down the street, she lost control of the car, causing Victoria and Christine to bang on the door from the inside. They were confused by their mother's actions. Passers-by noticed her driving erratically, and when they approached, she claimed that the children were late for the bus, justifying her reckless speed. Witnesses described her as unstable, with wild eyes. In addition, Sun Nam flaunted her wealth to make those around her jealous, even though she did not work. All her spending was done with John's money and credit. Sun Nam lost control of her finances to the point that John's steady salary was no longer sufficient. The situation became serious when they faced eviction due to unpaid utility bills and mortgage payments. Despite this threat, Sun Nam had no intention of stopping her spending habits. She continued to buy expensive items and frequented the city's posh clubs. John was unaware of the accumulated debts until it was too late. Sun Nam adopted a reckless lifestyle, spending her evenings at clubs while neglecting her children. When the threat of eviction became a reality, John could no longer bear the situation and made accusations against his wife. This caused her to react violently, leading to heated arguments that eventually escalated into physical violence. She hit John several times, forcing him to retreat to avoid hurting her. Despite his efforts to calm her down, she continued to attack him. In response, he grabbed her arm to restrain her until she calmed down, leaving marks on her wrist. Seeing the situation, Sun Nam decided to call the police. She claimed that her husband was abusing her. She misrepresented the facts, insisting that John had attacked her and that she had to endure constant verbal abuse and violence from him. Sun Nam continued to portray John as abusive and threatening. Finally, Victoria could no longer remain silent and informed the police that her mother had lied. She gave a truthful account of what had happened, as she had witnessed the entire conflict. Victoria explained that her mother had thrown the first punch, and even when John tried to calm her down, Sun Nam continued to act aggressively and threateningly. Faced with these conflicting stories, the police could only leave, suggesting that the family resolve the matter themselves. After the incident, nothing changed. Sun Nam continued to spend the money her husband earned. When John found out about this, he was furious and decided to confront her over the phone. Before the call, he had blocked her access to their accounts. During the conversation, Sun Nam lied and argued. He did not realize the potential consequences of his actions. When Sun Nam discovered that John had blocked her access to all of their accounts, she stormed into his office with a knife, threatened him, and cornered him. Faced with the threat of violence and with his children witnessing the chaos, John felt compelled to unlock the card. After this incident, John threw himself into work, taking more business trips to avoid his wife. To manage the expenses for the children and household bills, he was often away from home. In the fall of 2002, John went on a short business trip to China. During this trip, he met another woman and fell in love with her. John began looking for every opportunity to return to China to be with her and intended to divorce Sun Nam. On September 5, 2002, he emailed Sun Nam to inform her that he wanted a divorce. Although he had been struggling to fulfill his responsibilities as a father, he now wanted to take their children to China to be with his new girlfriend. He had a clear advantage over Sung Nam in that he had a stable income, while she did not. As a result, the ideal life she had tried to portray began to crumble. Sung Nam called John to discuss their personal problems. She was furious after receiving his message, and the news of his decision to divorce shocked her. He confirmed that he intended to initiate divorce proceedings as soon as he returned from his business trip. Sung Nam angrily threw the phone at Victoria, saying that their father wanted to take her and her sister to China. Victoria remained calm, picked up the phone, and told her father that this was a great plan, as living with their mother was unbearable. She expressed her eagerness to leave home and waited for her father to return. Sung Nam was acutely aware of the difficult situation around her. During the Christmas holiday of 2002, John returned from a business trip. At that time, Victoria was 14 years old, and her sister Christine was 12. John was 46 years old, and Sung Nam was 41. While everything seemed to be falling apart, Sung Nam noticed that everyone else was in a good mood. Despite being very angry, Sung Nam did not create any conflicts, which made Victoria and Christine feel uneasy. On the contrary, John appreciated the quiet atmosphere. When John returned from China, Sung Nam had completely changed. She prepared gifts for the whole family, dressed neatly, and decorated the house. She began serving drinks, creating a pleasant atmosphere. Sung Nam placed glasses for everyone and then stepped away to continue washing dishes. Victoria and Christine noticed something white at the bottom of their drinks but did not have time to warn their father before he finished drinking. Realizing that something was wrong, Victoria and Christine pretended to drink but secretly discarded their drinks. When Sung Nam left the room, they noticed that John seemed sluggish after drinking. He said he felt tired and went upstairs to sleep. Although Victoria and Christine had only taken a few sips, they also felt weak. They fell asleep until 8 a.m. the next day, December 25, 2002. Christine and Victoria woke up feeling unwell, not remembering how they had gotten to bed, but at first, there was nothing alarming. Victoria suspected that her mother had put sleeping pills in their drinks, although the reason was unclear. She felt relieved to wake up and find herself alive. Victoria and Christine decided to go downstairs to wish everyone a Merry Christmas. However, before they could leave the room, they heard a loud noise from the first floor that sounded like a gunshot. Earlier that morning, Sung Nam had sneaked into John's office, where he was working. She shot him once in the head from behind and then shot him 3 times in the back. Afterward, she went upstairs and stopped at the door. Victoria and Christine were horrified to see her reloading the gun. Sung Nam begged for forgiveness, saying that she had to do it, then pointed the gun at Victoria. There were 7 bullets left in the magazine. Christine, who had been frozen in shock, suddenly regained her composure. Seizing the moment, she grabbed the phone and called the police. Christine could wait for the operator to answer while Sung Nam reloaded. Christine tried to tell the police that there was a shooting in the house and provided the address. Soon, the police heard a series of gunshots as the call continued. Christine had to run away to escape her mother, who was about to shoot her. She ran into Victoria's bedroom just seconds before her mother opened fire. Christine was injured, but against all odds, both she and Victoria survived. She locked the door and waited for rescue, praying that her mother could not get in. Meanwhile, the patrol officers arrived at the house in emergency mode. Within minutes, they parked outside and heard several gunshots from inside, followed by silence. Unsure of what was happening, the officers cautiously entered the house with their weapons drawn. Inside, they first found John, who had been shot multiple times. Sung Nam shot himself behind a locked door, and she is unconscious. They also discovered Victoria and Christine, wounded but fortunately still alive. All three of them were rushed to the hospital. They were seriously injured and needed immediate medical attention. As they began to recover, the police interviewed them to gather information about the shooting. Sun Nam was in worse condition, but Victoria and Christine seemed to have little concern for her. On September 5, 2002, Sun Nam applied for a gun license. It took some time, but by December 17, she had legally obtained a pistol. Over the next week, she practiced target shooting diligently. This preparation suggested that the crime had been planned in advance. Sun Nam confided in her friends about her hatred for her husband and even mentioned her intention to buy a weapon to kill him. However, her friends considered Sun Nam's comments to be expressions of anger and did not believe that she would actually carry out her threat. The attack and Sun Nam's parenting made her friends key witnesses for the prosecution. Their testimony shocked both the jury and the experienced police officers. Sun Nam was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, which determined that she was fit to stand trial. The prosecution argued that Sun Nam had carefully planned the murder and attempted to kill her entire family, proving that she had intent and was of sound mind. Ultimately, Sun Nam Kwan Lisowski was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 45 years. Victoria and Christine were sent to live with their aunt and uncle. Throughout her incarceration, Sun Nam continued to misbehave and denied all charges against her. In 2008, Sun Nam confessed to her actions, saying that she could not accept the idea of divorce and was desperate to keep her husband, who had chosen to be with another woman. She admitted that she had tried to harm her children because she could not bear the thought of a stepmother caring for them. Sadly, in 2008, Sun Nam took her own life while in prison. Victoria and Christine wrote to her, hoping for a future reunion, but that day never came. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lauren Hugelmayer. Lauren Hugelmayer was born on June 9, 1988, in Los Angeles County, California. She was one of three daughters of Dale and Lori. Lauren grew up in a close-knit religious family that regularly attended their local church and was well loved in the community. She developed a reputation for being exceptionally kind, caring, known for her bright smile and vibrant personality. Lauren had a close bond with her older sister Beth, but she was even closer to her father, with whom she shared a trusting relationship. While in high school, Lauren met a classmate named Matthew Phelps, who would later play an important role in her life. At that time, it was unclear whether they were just acquaintances or had a closer relationship. After Lauren's family moved to North Carolina, Matthew transferred to another school, which interrupted their connection. After graduating from high school, Lauren chose to attend Appalachian State University, where she earned a degree in business administration and management in 2011. In 2014, Lauren received a direct message on Instagram from Matthew. While Lauren had a stable life, Matthew lived in Kent and faced significant challenges. His father was completely absent, and his mother had remarried several times. Matthew struggled to connect with any of his stepfathers. This lack of parental attention contributed to behavioral problems in his life. During high school, Matthew fell in with a bad crowd, began abusing alcohol and banned substance, particularly cough syrup, which is often misused for its psychoactive effects. His substance abuse became increasingly obvious, and his grades suffered as a result. In response, his grandparents decided to transfer him from public high school to a private Christian academy, hoping this change would help him turn his life around. Eventually, this decision paid off. Matthew improved his academic performance and distanced himself from negative influences. After graduating, he chose to enroll in a Baptist university with the goal of becoming a pastor. Although he later abandoned this ambition. Let's return to his online reunion with Lauren. Matthew and Lauren started talking to learn more about each other, they quickly discovered they had many shared interests, including being big fans of Star Wars and Harry Potter. They also connected through their strong Christian faith and then their desire to build a family together. As their conversations continued, they transitioned from chatting online to nearly daily phone calls. A few months later, they decided to enter a long-distance relationship. Their bond grew stronger, and Matthew made an effort to visit Lauren whenever possible. Eventually, he chose to move to North Carolina to be closer to her to deepen their relationship. Lauren was thrilled by this decision because she had always dreamed of finding someone with whom she could create a strong family. Most of Lauren's family welcomed Matthew, particularly her mother, who treated him like another son and tried to introduce him to the family. However, things were not as easy with Lauren's father, Dale. He seemed reluctant to accept Matthew as part of the family and often avoided him, though the reasons for this were unclear. It might have just been a feeling. Despite this, Lauren's family made efforts to help Matthew feel more comfortable, and they eventually invited him to a family dinner. That night, while playing games and talking, Matthew surprised everyone by confessing that he was married before he got into a relationship with Lauren, but his marriage had ended. He did not provide any reasons for his divorce, which raised concerns for Dale. Dale felt that Matthew's refusal to explain might indicate that he had done something wrong, making Dale worry about his daughter's future. However, Lauren and the rest of the family seemed unconcerned about this issue. It was puzzling because despite their strong traditional values, none of them questioned Matthew's honesty or character. Lauren and Matthew continued their relationship. In 2015, they decided to get engaged. On November 11, 2016, they finally got married and hosted a big celebration. The wedding was a success, and since they were both fans of Star Wars, they chose this theme for the celebration. However, there was one unpleasant incident. Matthew's mother wore white to the wedding, despite being told that it was inappropriate. This suggested that she did not approve of Lauren. Additionally, Lauren's family found Matthew's mother rude and unpleasant. Dale expressed his discontent with the wedding due to lingering doubts about his son-in-law. He tried to suppress these feelings to avoid ruining his daughter's special day. After the wedding, Lauren and Matthew appeared very happy, with Lauren frequently posting pictures of herself and Matthew on social media, suggesting they had a perfect relationship. However, behind the scenes, their situation was more complicated. Matthew's coldness and contradictions began to show, revealing his true character. Their different childhood experiences turned them into different individuals. They both had what could be said to be different views on life, so problems began to arise. Additionally, Matthew's mother's rude behavior toward Lauren worsened the situation. For reasons unknown, she excluded Lauren from the family and often made her feel unwelcome. At that time, Lauren was independent and responsible, she even juggling 3 jobs because of her love for children. She volunteered at a children's Sunday school, worked as an auditor for a pharmaceutical company, and sold scented candles, which she enjoyed. Lauren also formed strong friendships with her colleagues, who appreciated her kindness and empathy. Lauren's dreams and plans were tragically shattered in the early hours of September 1, 2017. At midnight, emergency services received a distressing call from a man who sounded confused and embarrassed. He reported, "I turned on the light and saw her lying dead on the floor, and I have blood on me. There's a bloody knife on the bed, and I think I did it. I can't believe it. I'm right next to her." This man was Lauren's husband, Matthew. Matthew claimed he couldn't remember anything. He explained that before going to bed, he had taken a lot of cough syrup, which he believed caused him to commit this terrible act. When the police arrived, they found that Lauren was still alive. They rushed her to the hospital. However, despite their efforts, she sadly succumbed to her injuries and blood loss before reaching the hospital. When investigators examined the scene, they noticed it appeared too orderly, almost as if it had been staged. The knife was neatly placed on the bed, and the syrup was prominently displayed on the table, matching the details provided in the emergency call. However, they were surprised to find very little blood on Matthew, only a few drops on his shirt and shoes. This led them to suspect that an attempt had been made to clean up the scene before the emergency was reported, indicating that something more complicated was happening. Police believe it was not an accident. Additionally, the police noted Matthew's unusual behavior. He appeared calm despite expressing sadness over his wife's death. This made Matthew the prime suspect in the case, and he was eventually arrested. Authorities confiscated mobile phones, computers, documents, and journals containing Matthew's notes for investigation. A blood sample was also taken for toxicology tests. Investigators faced the difficult task of informing Lauren's family about these developments, leaving them devastated. An autopsy revealed that Lauren had suffered 123 stab and cut wounds. This raised the question, could an over-the-counter cough syrup turn a loving husband into a murderer? The syrup contains two active ingredients. Some believe that taking it in high doses can lead to euphoria, agitation, psychosis, and destructive behavior. To address these concerns, the product's manufacturer issued a statement expressing condolences to Lauren's family while also confirming that there was no evidence linking the syrup to violent behavior. Additionally, toxicology tests on Matthew showed that, although the syrup was detected in his blood, the dosage was not high enough to impact his mental state. Therefore, his claim that he was intoxicated by syrup when he attacked his wife was dismissed. The investigators aimed to understand what led Matthew to commit this act, so they conducted a detailed investigation, gathering information from family and friends. They discovered that Lauren and Matthew's relationship was not as ideal as it appeared in photos. Shortly after their wedding, they began experiencing various issues. Lauren was very independent and hardworking. In contrast, Matthew had a different attitude toward work. He was not motivated to work and often struggled to find or keep a job. Whenever he started a new job, he would quickly quit without explanation. Additionally, Matthew had a problem with overspending, particularly on unnecessary items like game consoles, video games, and online gaming subscriptions. Lauren and Matthew had a savings account for a trip to Disney. However, Matthew spent all the money without Lauren's consent or knowledge, even taking money from her purse, which amounted to stealing. This behavior caused frequent arguments between them. His excessive spending led to financial problems, which the Hugelmayer family recognized. Their relationship became increasingly strained, so Lauren expressed to family and friends that she might leave if things didn't improve. When asked why she hadn't taken that step, she cited her religious belief that everyone can be redeemed if they have faith. This belief motivated her to give her marriage a chance, but in reality, she found it difficult to tolerate her husband's behavior. Friends of Lauren reported that Matthew was controlling and jealous. He wrongly accused Lauren of having an affair with a church friend, despite there being no evidence to back this claim. Matthew had an irrational fear that Lauren would leave him, which stemmed from his previous marriage. He revealed to her that he divorced his first wife because she had been unfaithful, cheating on him with a church staff member. This experience left him in constant fear of abandonment. However, Matthew's behavior was inconsistent. He became very close to a neighbor and spent a lot of time with her. Even though he denied any romantic involvement, Lauren was convinced he was cheating on her with this neighbor. Despite her accusations, Matthew continued to see the woman. During police questioning, the neighbor claimed that their relationship was purely platonic. She explained that they connected because both were dealing with depression and anxiety. However, she noticed that Matthew had begun to discuss painful subjects, mostly related to death, prompting her to limit their interactions. At one point, Matthew claimed he had decided to return to college to pursue his dream of becoming a pastor, in an effort to win back Lauren's trust and save their relationship. Lauren reacted positively to this news. However, as time went on, their situation did not improve. Lauren's relatives observed that she had been in a very bad state and was no longer as happy as she used to be. They felt guilty for not intervening sooner. Lauren's older sister, Beth, made a significant statement. She recounted a phone call with Lauren the night before, during which Lauren was cooking dinner. During that call, the neighbor knocked on the door looking for Matthew. Without hesitation, Matthew left with the neighbor, leaving Lauren's dinner untouched. Beth expressed her frustration, saying she could no longer accept the situation and was convinced Matthew was cheating on Lauren, leading Lauren to decide to leave him. As the police gathered more evidence, the motive behind Lauren's death became clearer. The authorities conducted a detailed investigation of the apartment and confirmed their initial suspicions: Matthew had cleaned up before calling emergency services. Detectives also found what appeared to be an intimate diary of Matthew. This diary contained notes about his arguments with Lauren, his struggles with low self-esteem, and his feelings of insecurity in their marriage, especially since he knew her family had never accepted him. When experts examined Matthew's mobile phone, they discovered troubling search queries in his history. These included questions about the dangers of cough syrup and its effects on consciousness. This strongly suggested two things: first, that the attack was premeditated, and second, that Matthew was trying to mislead the authorities into thinking he was unaware of killing his wife while under the influence of the syrup. An important detail uncovered through Matthew's mobile phone revealed that just hours before he killed his wife, they had a heated argument through text messages and calls. Matthew claimed that Lauren accused him of cheating and expressed her desire to end their marriage, sufficient reason for a troubled mind to decide to kill his wife. Additionally, police discovered a secret Instagram account belonging to Matthew under. The profile picture featured a character from the movie American Psycho, which is about a serial killer. His posts were filled with screenshots from the movie, and he even shared photos of himself dressed as one of its characters. Moreover, his posts contained themes that were completely contrary to Christian values, despite his self-identification as a believer. The last post was made just days before Lauren's murder and included disturbing photos of himself with a caption that read, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer," along with the hashtag "I found an angel that needs to be killed." Matthew's friend shared that he once expressed a fascination with killing, suggesting that taking a life would be a true joy. This troubling revelation paints a stark picture of Matthew, especially in light of statements made by his first wife concerning their separation. She revealed that their relationship, initially filled with common interests, deteriorated after marriage. Matthew began to overspend and failed to contribute financially. More alarmingly, he became abusive, often pulling her out of bed, throwing her to the floor, and assaulting her during his rages. This behavior left she terrified, leading her to seek a divorce. Her experience closely mirrors that of Lauren. During the trial, the defense argued that Matthew was not in his right mind during the crime and was likely suffering from instability and depression, worsened by substance use. They presented letters from Matthew's friends and colleagues to the court, claiming that his actions were out of character and that he was not a violent person. The trial occurred in October 2018. Although Matthew initially pleaded not guilty, he later accepted a plea agreement. On October 5, the judge found him guilty of first-degree involuntary manslaughter and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lauren's family is still deeply affected by her absence and feels guilty for not stopping her relationship. To honor her memory, they created a foundation focused on raising awareness about abusive relationships and domestic violence. Matthew Phelps was a manipulative person who only cared about his own needs, disguising himself as someone harmless. Sadly, Lauren's compassion blinded her to his true nature, and it may have only been in her final moments that she understood his true character. Unfortunately, there are many individuals like him who can deceive others with ease. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alexandra Kogut. Alexandra Kogut, 18, was a freshman at the State University of New York at Brockport. She was outgoing and fun-loving. Alexandra had been in a relationship with her boyfriend, Clayton Whitmore, for about 2 years. The couple had met in high school in New Hartford, New York, where they began dating. Despite attending different schools after graduation, they had maintained a close relationship. Although their schools were 3 hours apart, they kept in touch through phone calls, social media messages, and frequent visits. Clayton was a great guy who played hockey at Utica College in New York while studying to become an accountant. He was a skilled athlete and a promising hockey player, and many believed he had a bright future ahead of him. Alexandra's family and friends liked Clayton and considered him a promising young man. They hoped that their relationship would develop into something serious over time. In high school, Alexandra had participated in track and field as well as swimming. She also represented her university in competitions. On Friday, September 28, 2012, Alexandra was excited because her boyfriend, Clayton, was coming to visit her for the weekend. They hadn't seen each other in a long time, and Alexandra missed him. Around 3 p.m., she asked her friend and neighbor if she could borrow some clothes. The two often shared outfits, and her friend agreed. Together, they picked out a nice dress. After trying on dresses, Alexandra went to a swim team meeting. She was running late, so Clayton, who had arrived earlier, had to wait for her. Alexandra called him to let him know she would be late. When Alexandra returned from the swim team meeting, she met Clayton, and together they went to visit a friend of his for dinner. They didn't return to campus until after midnight. Alexandra had assured her mother that she would call or text when she got back to avoid causing concern, but she didn't. This was unusual because Alexandra was always reliable in such matters. Her mother became increasingly worried, sensing that something was wrong. At 2:42 a.m., her mother decided to contact university security and requested a welfare check on her daughter. University security responded quickly and went to Alexandra's dormitory to check. They knocked on the door, which was unlocked, and entered the room. Inside, they found a horrific scene. The dormitory room, which Alexandra and her roommate shared, was covered in blood. In the middle of the room lay a young girl, face down and dead. The victim had multiple injuries, and it was immediately clear that this was not an accident but a brutal murder. Alarmed, they quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found a photo of Alexandra and Clayton together, and they recognized Clayton. That night, the police saw him walking down the street with a girl. He was holding an open can of beer, which attracted the attention of a patrol officer. Clayton was ticketed for the open can of beer but remained calm and cooperative. He then threw the can away and crossed the street, disappearing from sight. As the investigation progressed, it was revealed that Alexandra and her boyfriend, Clayton, had gone to her dorm room together. It was later discovered that Clayton had planned to flee to Canada after the incident. Police began interviewing dorm residents to identify witnesses and gather more evidence. However, most students were not in their rooms at the time. Many had gone home for the weekend, while others were partying or visiting friends. Some residents reported hearing screams and sounds of fighting in the distance but paid little attention, as such noises were common. At around 3 a.m., Clayton's father called 911 and informed the police that his son had confessed to the murder. He explained that Clayton had called him, sounding very agitated, and admitted to doing something terrible. However, Clayton's father had no further details to provide and suggested that the police contact Clayton directly. He also mentioned that he did not know his son's exact location. Police attempted to contact Clayton and trace his phone but were unsuccessful. When they called Clayton's father back, he mentioned that Clayton's girlfriend was in Brockport and that Clayton might still be with her. At this point, police determined that Clayton was still near the crime scene. A patrol car was dispatched to the scene approximately 45 minutes after Clayton's father's initial call. Shortly thereafter, Clayton himself called 911, stating that he wanted to surrender because he had committed a terrible crime. Police located and arrested Clayton Whitmore at approximately 4 a.m. at a rest stop on the New York State Thruway. At this point, police confirmed that the murdered woman was Alexandra Kogut. They discovered that she had used her key card to enter the dormitory building just before she was killed. At the police station, Clayton was questioned to determine what had happened that night and why Alexandra had been killed. Clayton insisted that his relationship with Alexandra had been normal and respectful. However, he said things had taken a turn for the worse on the evening of the incident. According to him, Alexandra had yelled at him in public for no apparent reason. Although she was sweet and cheerful with others, he felt that she had disrespected him. Clayton believed that her behavior was unreasonable and unacceptable. Clayton admitted that he had been holding back resentment toward Alexandra but finally lost control after being fined while walking down the street. He returned to her room feeling tense. Alexandra told him that she wanted to have a serious talk. She revealed that she suspected Clayton of cheating because, some time ago, a photo of an unfamiliar girl had appeared on his phone. When he failed to provide a clear explanation, Alexandra began provoking him by shouting and acting disrespectfully and aggressively. She then began to push him. Finally, Clayton could not take the pressure anymore. In a fit of rage, he attacked Alexandra, throwing her against the wall. He then began hitting her and was unable to stop. He only realized the severity of his actions when he saw Alexandra lying unconscious on the floor, showing no signs of life. Clayton admitted that, during the attack, he had not thought to stop or try to help her. He told police he had been angry and claimed that it was not intentional and that he had no plan or desire to harm her. Clayton initially fled the scene of the crime. After realizing the severity of his actions, he called his father and confessed. His father urged him to surrender to the police, which he eventually did. Although he expressed remorse, Clayton avoided confirming whether a weapon had been used in the murder. He later revealed more details, stating that after punching Alexandra several times, he noticed her breathing had become labored, and she was making wheezing sounds. In response, he took a curling iron and struck her on the head until the noises stopped. Clayton claimed he was fully conscious at the time. Alexandra's autopsy supported his claim, confirming blunt force trauma to the head as the cause of death. Police found blood on the curling iron, along with other evidence indicating that Alexandra's head injury had also been caused by hitting the wall. Clayton was charged with murder and held without bail pending trial. However, he later recanted his confession and denied his guilt. The investigation continued for a long time as police interviewed people who had been involved with Clayton. It was highly likely that he had intentionally harmed Alexandra. Their suspicions were reinforced by the testimony of Clayton's ex-girlfriend, who revealed that she had been subjected to constant violence from him. She decided to end their relationship after he tried to strangle her during an argument. At one point, it seemed as though he might actually kill her, but he ultimately held back. Out of fear, she fled to another city to escape him. Several of Clayton's friends also confirmed his aggressive and erratic behavior. They described him as short-tempered and hostile. One friend recalled an incident at a bar where Clayton wielded a knife and threatened a group of strangers. By the spring of 2014, the case went to trial. The prosecution presented a recording of Clayton confessing to the murder, along with various pieces of physical evidence collected by forensic experts. His fingerprints and DNA were found at the crime scene. The defense acknowledged that Clayton had committed the murder but argued that it was unintentional. Their goal was to secure a reduced sentence. Clayton's attorneys made it clear to the jury and the court that Clayton had been extremely distressed that evening due to being insulted by Alexandra, being fined by the police, and being pressured by Alexandra during a conversation about his betrayal. They argued that these factors had caused Clayton to become emotionally unstable. They claimed that he had lost control and directed his anger at Alexandra. The lawyers stressed that Alexandra had provoked Clayton and that the murder should be considered to have occurred in a state of emotional distress. Clayton blamed his aggressive and emotionally unstable behavior on his father. He explained that his aggression stemmed from years of abuse at the hands of his father, who had treated him and other family members cruelly. According to Clayton, he had suffered years of pressure, moral degradation, and physical abuse from his father. Clayton recounted incidents such as his father beating his brother with a baseball bat, breaking his sister's nose, and kicking his mother. Once, when his father found the children's fingerprints in the car, he tried to force the children to eat the TV remote. Clayton expressed remorse for not being able to resist his father's abusive influence, admitting that he had become a mirror image of his father, whom he despised. Clayton admitted that this led him to humiliate and abuse his girlfriend, act aggressively, and harbor hatred for the world. He apologized to Alexandra's family, expressing genuine remorse for his inability to change his behavior. The prosecution pointed out that there were almost no photographs of Clayton smiling. He appeared cold and distant in all of them. Was this behavior part of his nature? While prosecutors did not dispute Clayton's allegations of abuse by his father, they argued that this did not excuse his actions. The trial lasted about 3 weeks, during which dozens of witnesses testified. The jury deliberated and eventually returned a verdict, finding Clayton Whitmore guilty. He was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Clayton showed no emotion throughout the trial, but after the verdict was announced, he broke down and cried. Notably, Alexandra's family was shocked to learn about the alleged abuse she endured during the relationship. They were unaware of any problems between Alexandra and Clayton, as she had never mentioned any cruelty or aggression toward her. However, when police examined Alexandra's phone, they uncovered at least 30 threatening voice messages from Clayton. It is believed there may have been more, but these recordings were not thoroughly analyzed. Police dismissed this evidence, citing the need for voice analysis, which could have further delayed the case. As a result, none of these threats were presented in court. This evidence could have led to the case being reclassified as first-degree murder, which carries a harsher sentence than manslaughter. About an hour before Alexandra was fatally beaten, she posted a final message on her social media page. It is unclear what was on her mind at the time, but she may have sensed impending danger. Following Alexandra's tragic death, her relatives established a charity to support women who have endured domestic violence, encouraging them to report their experiences and raising public awareness of the issue. Supporters of the charity identify themselves by painting their pinkies purple, a tribute to Alexandra's favorite color.